it's legal, nonetheless.
The code library.
I'm going to do a feedlot in Jerome,
Yeah.
and they point through even though they don't.
Yeah.
Down there.
I wasn't. Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about?
Yes, I do.
That's one of the people on the class.
What? What's the Wi-Fi password?
So what is it? Just a plan or the
Oh, great. Okay. Never mind.
So these are the minutes from last
That's why we got Mr. Schroeder here this week. Yeah.
Oh. Wow.
Those are minutes taken. Is that Schroeder?
No. Yes.
Not you.
No. All right, I'm Mrs. Spot. Right. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Planning and Zoning Commission. Tonight, June 21st, 6 o'clock. We have established a quorum. I'm going to move a couple of things, Commission, on the agenda here, but first let's approve the minutes for May 16th, 2022. Do I have a motion?
Chairman, I make motion to approve the minutes for May 16th, 2022.
And a second?
Second.
All right, first by Billy, second by Travis. All in favor?
All right.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion passes. All right, Commission, I'd like to take number 8 and move it to the very beginning up here before number 3. Couple things. We have 2 new Planning and Zoning Commission members with us this evening. We have Miss Christina Drake, and we also have Mr. Scott Harjo. Did I say that correct?
Yes.
Perfect. We also have an Assistant City Planner, Mr. Chris Curtis, which we would like to do a big shout out to as well. Do you care to say anything?
Happy to have the job.
Oh, there you go. Okay, perfect. Well, we're happy that you're here, so thank you very much for that. Do you two want to care to say anything as well?
Customary safe.
Oh, ladies first. Thank you so much. I am Christina Drake. I am a realtor associate broker here in Mountain Home. And I'm super excited to be able to bring some of the concerns that I hear from my clients and also some of the concerns that I hear from citizens that I've spoken to about things concerning with planning and zoning. So I'm very excited to be here. I just thank you for having me.
Wonderful. Thank you for being here.
I'm Scott Harjo, local business owner, just decided to get more involved in the community. My wife and I make a habit of attending city council meetings and took some pretty strong interest in our community and decided that this was a good first step.
Awesome, Scott. Good to have you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Finally, I know it's not on this list, but I do want to also recognize Nancy Berletic is the one that I believe Christina, you are the one that's replacing Nancy, and I just want to, yes, big shout outs. 16 years in service for the Planning and Zoning Commission for Mountain Home, so we appreciate her time. Wonderful lady to get to know and to work with as well. So if you're watching, Nancy, big shout out to you. All right. Let's move down our list here. Recognizing persons in the audience not on the agenda. Do you have anybody who would like to come up and share, speak, say? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on. Moving into our public hearing and actions. Our first here is a conditional use permit for a drive-through by Dusty, I am going to butcher that, Woolstenholm. Woolstenholm? Oh, good, I got it. Request for a conditional use permit by Dusty Woolstenholm has applied for a conditional use permit for a drive-up window for a financial institution to be located in the 2400 block of American Legion Boulevard. Mr. Cherry.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair. First, I'm going to yield the time over to the applicant, and then I will fill any blanks that are there. So I'm going to invite the applicant to come forward and sit right here and briefly explain what they are proposing for the subject property.
Thanks. Good evening, Commissioners. Thanks for having us. As Brock knows, well, firstly, my name is Ian Shearing. I am with Lombard Conrad Architects. I'm here to represent Idaho Central Credit Union. This has been a long, drawn-out process. We've looked at multiple properties on American Legion over the last couple years, and we've, I guess, have an option to purchase this property based on the outcome of tonight's meeting. But I think it's fairly straightforward. This is a typical Idaho Central Credit Union branch. It has a small component inside, probably 6 tellers. And then we have a drive-through component, which is why we're here this evening. One correction I would like to make is that this doesn't have a drive-through window, but it does have a drive-up and a drive-through component. So there are 4 lanes, with the inner lane of the drive-through component having an ATM machine and a night drop box for deposits. And then the additional lanes are for VAT tubes, which are the tubes that, suck the canister up and take it into the branch. And those will make up the remainder of the drive-throughs. Drive-through lanes, there will be 2 of them, a forward one and an aft one. And each of those, assuming you have 2 vehicles transacting at the same time, there's a stacking length of another 4 vehicles per lane. When those vehicles stack, they do not impact or impede traffic on the site. And the site has been designed in such a way that the pedestrian traffic, or those folks that are actually parking in the parking lot and coming into the building to transact, don't really interact with the drive-through traffic. So that's sort of the ultimate goal. One item if you've read this, you'll know that we were exploring doing an exit only from the drive-through component back onto American Legion Boulevard. That falls under ITD's jurisdiction, and discussions that we had with them turned out that wasn't something they were in favor of. So we have decided to not do that, and the site as you see it now is how it will remain. And then beyond that, if you have any questions, happy to field anything.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. At this time, actually, I'll go ahead and pull you out, and I will open up to public.
Okay.
Do you want?
Yeah. Do you have any other questions, Mr. Chair?
I do not. Commission, do you have any questions?
No, not yet.
No.
Or you're the public first.
Yeah, I think definitely. Thank you.
Thank you.
So with that being said, I do like to open up the public hearing for this. Anybody who'd like to come up and speak to the conditional use permit for the financial institution? Seeing nobody, then we'll go ahead and close the public hearing on that. And Commission, it is now up to us for conversation. Mr. Cherry, do you have anything you would like to add?
Yes.
Okay.
Especially since we have some newer members. This isn't our first drive-through that we have seen. Our code is unique when it comes through drive-throughs, in that we don't have any numerical values that we have to meet as far as stacking. So we don't say, okay, they have to have 5 stacking spaces. We put that upon the applicant to say, hey, you need to analyze your own peak volumes and then tell us what stacking needs to be there.
Could you say 9914 on screen, maybe?
I thought you were the scribe. I thought that was your job.
Well, I'm writing.
Yes. And we'll get that for you as well. But what you're looking at, especially for our newer commission members, is there's 2 portions of code. There's one section which is just conditional use permits. Everything that we have to look at just for conditional use permits in general. And then for this type of use, which we're trying to pull up, is we have specific standards for specific uses, which a drive-through has its own criteria, which is listed in the staff report. And if the internet wants to work.
Well, if you have all the 9914 standards, the main thing is, particularly for the benefit of the 2 new commissioners, that a conditional use is a use that isn't permitted outright. It's only permitted if it meets certain conditions. And each conditional use has to meet certain general performance standards and then some specific ones for the specific kind of use. And so that's what I was. And they say that, well, if they're in the staff, probably just list it out. Okay, you have the staff.
Yep.
Okay.
They're there.
Brock, I do have a question. So I understand the conditional use permit for a drive-up window, but if they don't have a drive-up window, why is their conditional use still on a drive-up window?
Yes.
That's where we go to our definitions. Our code isn't a perfect document yet. With work, we're going to make it better. But basically, a drive-through doesn't have to have a window component. A drive-through is deemed any use where a person remains in their vehicle and receives goods and services.
May the scribe read the definition?
Yes.
Thank you. Drive-in establishment. An establishment by which by design, physical facility service, or by packaging procedures encourages or permits customers to purchase a commodity or to receive services or be entertained while remaining in their motor vehicles.
So a variety of things could fall under this definition, such as a drive-in movie theater, a drive-through for a bank, or even a drive-through car wash. And the C3 zoning district says that this is a use that needs a conditional use permit because the code sees it as a use that could have unanticipated consequences if implemented poorly.
Right.
So it says we need to take into account the area of what's around it and try to mitigate any negative consequences if possible. And with this one, staff has been able to see we have 4 bays, there's 16 stacking there. We pay attention really closely to, is this going to have potential to bleed out into public right-of-way? Which, public right-of-way, no. And we also notify different political jurisdictions, such as ITD, so that they can give their 2 cents as well, which we notify them, and also the applicant has been working very closely with them, and they would tell us, hey, we're nervous that this could go out onto American Legion and start trouble, which we haven't received any of that, nor is that anticipated. So that's what we have for you today, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Any other questions?
One question I got, Mr. Chairman, is that turn, I guess I'm not missing how they're getting into the property itself. Okay, they're going to be turn lane.
So there won't be a dedicated turn lane off of American Legion.
Okay, so it's just going to, okay. Okay, I guess I just didn't recognize that correctly. Thank you.
Travis, anything?
So there is a turn lane going in or no? Because there's one coming out, right?
So what you see here is we have the site specifically. There will be a internal drive, and they have to have a right-of-way permit in order to access that. And I believe they're probably already doing that with ITD, which says this is the type of access that you're able to have. I believe it's anticipated that they will have, well, and that's what you have the luxury of asking the applicant, which I believe they could do. Could they ask a clarifying question even after the public hearing is closed to the applicant? As far on how is the property being accessed, whether or not it's a right in, right out off of American Legion to
Is it not in the drawings?
So we have half of it here.
There was nothing stated specifically about whether or not there's going to be any kind of designated turn lanes
Correct.
from American Legion.
Yeah, you can ask the applicant and then see if there's any more public comment after that. That would matter if you still.
Okay, Mr. Ian, can I get you back up here?
Chairman, I'd also like to throw in a mix if I can.
Yeah.
I was curious about peak volumes. I didn't see any information about peak volumes, since we're on the subject of traffic.
Yep. So I guess one of the questions that we keep having is, are there any, defined turning lanes going into the credit union itself off of American Legion?
So what we show there is our portion of the site, as Mr. Cherry pointed out. That line that runs down is actually the center line of the road. So that property line is common with the adjacent property from which this property is being purchased, right? And the agreement is that Idaho Central Credit Union will improve the entire width of that because they'll probably develop it first. And then the adjacent owner will compensate Idaho Central Credit Union when they get to that point. So what you're seeing is only half the width of the road. I believe that road itself is actually 35 feet wide, and then traffic turning in, heading eastbound, will obviously have right-of-way because they're on the right-hand side. And coming the other way, I believe there's a turning lane there. And that portion, so Idaho Central Credit Union really hasn't had any discussion with the Idaho Transportation Department because that was done by the Desert Sage folks who are purchasing the property to the east. So we were brought in, and the property was sort of given to us with, this is the joint access that you are going to have, and then we don't even get to have a curb cut off of American Legion Boulevard based on conversations with ITD. They don't want, there's certain requirements in terms of how close they can be from one another, from adjacent curb cuts on the other side of the street. And so that was all sort of predetermined before we even got to this stage of the process.
Okay, I have a question, because if I remember correctly, I don't think the left lane, turn lane, if I'm coming down from the hill, I go to Walmart and I want to get to my bank, there is no, if I remember correctly, there's no center, like there's no center lane to basically turn from.
No, I think that actually, yes.
Point of clarification for Commissioner Drake.
Yeah.
So, what the applicant is saying is, I believe that it is going to be upon the landowner of whom they are purchasing, who is Desert Sage, to fulfill all of the permits with ITD as far as their right-of-way and what they are going to be able to do.
Gotcha.
So at the end of the day, whatever is going to be here as far as their access will be up to ITD.
Gotcha.
Granted, that would be nice information to have here, but sometimes the order of operations is a little bit different. Of when are they going to review the right-of-way permit?
If you build it, they will come?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I guess that's my main concern, is having that turn lane there.
Travis?
Peak volumes, so how much could the drive-through handle? I mean, obviously 4 spaces stacked apiece, so 16 plus 4, 21 vehicles, give or
We will
take.
have 2, 4, 6 VAT
With one leading.
tubes. Correct. So the inner lane right up against the building has the night drop and the ATM. That generally sees some traffic, normally end of day for doing deposits and whatnot. And actually, I might even defer to Dusty Woolstenhume, who is ICCU's representative here tonight. He can speak more specifically about the volumes. But I do know that with the recent COVID, there was more of a spike with not in-person transactions, and so I don't know that it's necessarily more in terms of traffic. It's just a different kind of traffic.
Sure. Do all the stations that are there, I see, I might be reading it
There will
wrong.
be 6 stations.
6 stations, are they all capable of the exact same transactions?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So you won't specifically have a lane that's overburdened, but more than another?
The only other lane that we have is the outer one where you can see we have a future remote ATM, and that would actually probably cut down the traffic because it's centered between the 2 VAT tubes.
Right.
So you would really only have 1 transaction happening in lieu of 2 if the VAT tubes were.
So would they have to walk up in person to a lane that a car could also walk up to, or is it
No, that's
specifically
a
going to have a?
vehicle-specific ATM machine.
Okay,
As is the one that is actually on the building itself. They're both
Okay.
drive up and transact.
so there's no space for them to be able to walk up and
No.
in person? They'd have to go inside the bank?
Correct.
Okay. Mine.
Jeff, question? Do we need to reopen a public hearing after that?
Yes. See if anyone else
Okay,
wants.
Ian, thank you so much,
Thank you.
appreciate that.
Just asking for more testimony.
Okay, and again, because we asked questions, I want to open up public hearing. Anybody who has any other questions, comments, or concerns? Come on up. I do need your full name and address. You know the deal.
Do you need to sign that, Jeff?
Yes.
Carl Vaughn, 2586 North Haskett. I can answer that question on why that center lane turn bay is not there. I retired from ITD just recently. There's no curb on the one side. It has to be curbed to turn that center lane in. So as you come from the canal to that piece of property just south, there's no curb there. That's why we had to bring the line, get rid of the turn bay islands, go to a single line, then open up again. There's no curb on that left side.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
That's there. So you do have an option with that, that you can mandate them to put a de-acceleration lane. If you know the future of that property on development, you can request them to say, hey, there's going to be a heavy volume of traffic. ITD doesn't pay for that. That's not in our right-of-way. They have to give up that property to make that de-acceleration lane turn bay, just like St. Luke's and everything on Meridian Road and Eagle Road, we do the same things.
Okay.
So that's up to the planning and zoning to do that.
Awesome.
So.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, hearing none, go ahead and close the public hearing on that one as well. Commission, unless you have any other comments, I entertain a motion.
I'd like to make a motion, Chairman.
Travis?
I'd like to make a motion to approve to the city council a conditional use permit to allow a drive-in establishment located at 2400 block of American Legion Boulevard with such attachments, subject to site plan amendment as required by building, public works, fire, and zoning officials to comply with applicable city codes and standards.
Okay, have a first, have a second. Second by Billy. Okay, I'll go down the line. Travis?
Aye.
Billy?
Aye.
Christina?
Aye.
Sorry. You people, it's fine. Scott? Aye. And aye as well for me. Motion passes. Thank you. Thank you. A second item on our list, we have a conditional use permit for a drive-through with the New Potato Creek Holding LLC. A request for a conditional use permit from the New Potato Creek Holding LLC has applied for a conditional use permit for a drive-through car wash to be located on City View Drive. Mr. Cherry.
Mr. Chair, I'm going to defer first to the applicant's representative, Ms. Kelly Stedman with Wolpert Architects. Engineering.
Yeah. Big difference. We don't like to be called architects. So my name's Kelly Stedman. I'm with Wolpert Engineering. We are working with Tidal Wave Auto Spa and New Potato Creek Holdings on a proposed Tidal Wave car wash, which is your pull-through car wash and associated vacuum areas. The Tidal Wave is going in on American Legion Boulevard and City View Drive. It is just south of the Auto Ranch, across American Legion from Walmart. You have your Dutch Brothers that just went in, and Taco Bell is under construction just south of it. Access to the site is going to be on City View Drive. They don't have any access onto American Legion. The lot that they're going on is about 1.26 acres. The car wash itself is 3,500 square foot car wash. It's pretty much a wash tunnel with a small building area that has the equipment in it, one restroom by code, and another area where some employees would sit just to supervise the site. Typically, they have 3 employees on site to manage the site for any issues during the day. The hours of operation are 7 days a week, 8 to 8, open 12 hours a day. You drive into the car wash on a one-way drive, and you enter a pay station that has 2 pay stations where you pull up, and you either have a monthly membership or you can pay single use. So monthly membership, it's unlimited washes, there's different levels of things, and there's discounts for multiple cars. And as you go through the pay station, then you enter in the tunnel, automatic car wash. It runs you through. It can handle about 1 car a minute is a good wash through the tunnel. Before you enter the tunnel, there is kind of a bailout lane that lets you, if you don't want to wash your car, you can just go straight to the vacuums, so you would just go through. On the other side, then you come through and you can access all the vacuum stations. There's canopy vacuum stations and products to wash your car and trash bins, and then boom vacs to vacuum out your car in the center parking area per se, and then there's an exit back out the same way where you came in at City View. The buildings are split face block veneer with some kind of lick and stick brick, blue metal clad roofs. Again, like I said, there's structures on the site is a canopy for the pay station, a back house, a trash enclosure, and canopies over a section of the vacuums. There's 27 vacuum spaces, 20 of them are under canopies. The site they have 4 underground reclamation tanks where the water is being recycled and reused for rewashing. That's about 6,000 gallons of water that it can hold, and then it recycles back and can wash cars a second time. So that limits some of the pressures on the wastewater systems. There's existing storm pipe that runs through the site that will be relocating slightly to reroute some of the stormwater. There's already stormwater management practices in place for this development in the detention basin that will accommodate the proposed development going in on Lot 7. Any questions?
Perfect. Before we do that, I'll go ahead and open it up to the public hearing as well. Awesome. Yeah, thank you. And with that, I'll go ahead and open up to the public hearing. Anybody have any comments, questions, concerns, thoughts, ideas?
Most of you know me, excuse me, Commissionwoman Drake and Harjo, welcome. Misty Pierce, Donna Subdivision. At the last special meeting through the City Council, because of the planning and zoning situation, it was in-depth, spoke about in-depth with Mr. Yukiti that we are in the negative, almost in the negative 120 in EDUs. So, and we still need to drill a well, and we don't know if that's going to hit or produce water. So I just ask you guys to please take in consideration the fact that we are very low on water, and we're handing out permits or passing things that need water, and we're in the negative 120s for EDUs.
Thank you, Misty.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
Do I need to re-sign again?
No, I think you're good.
State your name.
Carl Vaughn, 2586 North Haskett, Mountain Home. So I do have a couple questions on this. As a person in front of me brought up that we are at negative 87 on EDU. I'm not opposed to the business at all. It's just that the water usage, if you just said average car is 35 gallons to wash a car, that's 35,000 gallons a day, comes out to 105,000 a month, comes to 1.2 million in a year. And that's a car wash's goal is to be about 100 cars a day. That makes them profitable. So the other issue that I have is the TIS. Since the city and the planning and zoning hasn't proposed proportionate share, as you guys keep building this section up, your turn bay is going to go away. If you've seen it, the north part of Walmart where I've islandized that will go all the way down to 18. ITD is going to mandate going all the way to 18th Street. So it's going to look like Eagle Road. I hate to say that, I've lived here 30 years, but when you don't have proportionate share, these businesses are coming in and they're not contributing to the signal, which that city view going into Walmart there, someone's going to be on the hook for the whole thing. And it's not going to be one business. It's going to back to the city again. I've brought this to the attention of Mr. Brock and everybody in the last 6-7 years. You guys can develop all you want up there. Pretty soon you're going to be islandized and right in, right out for everybody, from 18th all the way up to 8th Street. So, and then with that roundabout, it's just going to make havoc through there. I'm not opposed to the business. Just got to have a long-term plan. Make sure it works correctly with that. So that's all I have. Thanks.
Thank you, Carl. Anybody else? Okay, seeing none, I'll go ahead and close the public hearing for that. Mr. Chair, do you have anything else to add?
Yes, I think it's very important to recognize that the conditional use permit is for the drive-through component. It's not the car wash. In other jurisdictions, they do have a conditional use permit for the car wash specifically because there is a lot of water usage and other things to recognize. However, this is where I will also defer to legal counsel. I don't know if this body can create conditions upon water utilization, being that that's not what the conditional use permit is for. I believe that the nexus has to be with the drive-through component. I can tell you that, and I've spoken to the developers and they've been very forthright of things that we are hoping that they will have. Just as much as water usage, water discharge is extremely important. And other municipalities that I've worked at, that's been a big issue of what's going into the sewer and how do we know how much they are using. They have been very amicable and they're actually going to put in a system, almost like a mini manhole, so that we can see how much discharge is actually going into our system, so it can be easily measurable, so we don't have to tear things up. That they've spoken to, but I think it's just very important that you see the distinction that the conditional use permit is for this. Not that the car wash isn't important, and not that that shouldn't be considered. I'm not saying that at all, but I think it's very important to defer to legal. How much of your decision can be based on the car wash use versus on the conditional use permit for the drive-through component?
So, I guess next time we should have these all up. So if you look at the land use chart in 974, car washes are a conditional use in the C1, and a car wash itself is a permitted use in C2, C3, C4, I1, and I2. So the car wash, the activity of washing cars, putting up a building, scrubbing cars off, and using water to do it, is a permitted use. It's a one over which you don't have any discretion. The only portion of this over which you have discretion is if the drive-through component. So, there you have it.
So wait, correct me if I'm wrong, what you're really saying is the concerns of water usage, even bringing up what Mr. Carl brought up about streets, doesn't matter because it's permitted based on the zoning of that area.
Your task in approving or denying this conditional use permit is to evaluate the standards set forth in 9914, that the location shall not cause an increase of commercial traffic in nearby residential neighborhoods, increase general traffic congestion, general circulation, provides pedestrians A through H, none of which refer to water.
Okay. Thank you, Jeff. Appreciate that.
However, I do want to add on as far as streets go and everything else. I, for one, don't want to have an Eagle Road in Mountain Home. That's where me and Mr. Bond, we definitely have a consensus. It's the mechanism of how do we get there.
Yeah.
Proportionate share, yes, is a good idea. I'm hoping that as the city engages in their master transportation plan, that we develop standards and procedures for creating those mechanisms of how that's done. Right now, Mountain Home has the problem of the market is moving faster than we can plan adequately for it, while letting people have their private property rights, while ensuring the good for our community. I can tell you that those are things being considered by staff. We're financing it for this next fiscal year to have a master transportation plan that can give us some of those first documents, just because right now the organizational capacity to do it on a individual project basis is it's just limited.
Okay, thank you. Commission, questions about the drive-through?
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Question for Mr. Cherry. The queue for cars coming in, is that an accurate representation at 16, 17 car?
Yes. 16 car stacking. And once again, this is one of those having, really good questions to ask the applicant would be what is the general runtime? And I believe it was probably mentioned during the applicant's presentation that, X amount of minutes to put cars through. Really, what I'm looking at, so private drives, every road's important. A private drive less so, because if it queues up and we have people creating hassle within the private drive, short answer, it's not our problem yet. If it goes to City View, then it becomes our problem. If, heaven forbid, it ever went on to American Legion, it becomes a huge problem and we get in big trouble and we get our hands slapped by ITD. So, given the applicant's testimony of what they're able to provide, I believe that we do have sufficient stacking. The one thing that could be threatened, so this is a conditional use permit specifically for this component. I've never have seen a land use situation become that bad, but let's say that this is the only tunnel car wash in town, everyone in Mountain Home loves it, they always want to be there, and let's say that we keep on having problems, and it's continual. A conditional use permit can be revoked. And we have discretion to go up there and be like, all right, you have to stop it, close it off.
Conditions under which it was approved are not being met.
Yeah.
The specific
Correct.
conditions under which it was approved.
So we have those to look at. I believe the applicant not meeting those conditions would be bad business practice, and I don't think they're anticipating to create a broken system. But I do believe that the stacking is sufficient as illustrated by the applicant.
So that's 16 on each lane, or is that 16?
That's
total?
16 total. I don't believe it's on each lane.
So, and to lend a little bit of perspective, when they opened up the Jacksons over on our side of town? Yeah, there were times when I couldn't get in and put my escape through because there was so many people there. It was just easier to drive away than to go get it done. And I certainly did not see 16 cars stacked at the same time there. So, just some perspective.
Commission?
I have a question. So are these, and this may be relevant or not, are these 16 standard size cars? And what length? Yeah, you'd be surprised about the amount of people that can wash a vehicle on the inside, especially the size of a truck. And I guess I'm more curious about this corner here and being able to make that corner with a larger truck, or causing congestion, having to back up to take a 3-point turn.
That's a great question.
Thanks to technology, I think I can find that
Perfect.
for us really quick. Alright, so this is approximate. They're 18 feet, so this is a standard sedan. 20 feet, so just so you see the distance, this is 18 feet. A typical length for an SUV is 20 feet. If you have a truck, it's plus. The average, I believe our code says a parking space only has to be 9 by 18. I like 9 by 20, personally, but that's just what code says as far as lengths. So I believe what the applicant did in preparing this, they looked at our length of parking space, and that's the length of the car that they would use.
I don't know, Travis, I'm thinking also that turn into Brista. A
Yeah,
lot of trucks are going to that.
it's difficult. If you've ever driven a big truck through there, it's definitely not polite. Also, are they having to drive through, I see the directional arrows, are they having to drive through the car wash in order to get into the vacuum area? And if they are, is the entrance and the exit the same?
Chairman
So
Waller?
if you wrap around vehicles, and we'll say we do get in surplus of 16 or more, and it covers this entrance, then what? No cars leave until enough cars are washed? Or people wait in the road?
Mr. Chair.
So I see, and I don't know if this is what you are referring to, Commissioner Agnes. So there's a escape lane right here. And I believe that these vacuums are intended to be utilized by paying customers, that you just don't go and use the free vacuums and leave, which looks like that's what its design is. For these vacuums to be accessed after being washed. And it looks like you can come around here and also southward. As far as additional information concerning larger trucks, I would be curious, what is the maximum height of vehicle that can go in? If you are aware, Jackson's has a 7 feet maximum, which kind of makes it difficult for larger trucks to utilize it. And I would assume that there would probably be a comparable maximum height for this, and maybe that would be a good question for the applicant in order to get an idea as far as the type of vehicles they plan on facilitating.
Would you mind coming back up for us?
If she could also explain just the traffic, like you would explain, I'd like to hear from the applicant, if I can,
Yeah.
please.
Okay, so that we did run trucks, larger trucks through there. We kind of even looked at trailers for that turn. So if you're coming south on Private Drive and that hairpin, That's the tougher turn, but they can make it, and the nose on there is mountable, also for emergency vehicles. So that end of the nose is mountable. We're not intending the truck to drive onto that curb. But that U-turn is a sharper turn for a truck or long truck or a trailer. They would almost have to, it'd be easier for them to come in the other way. They can make the turn though. We also look at the Delta, like coming in, they really don't want any car, having, because there's a grade on private drive. So they're real particular about the grades coming into that drive so that no truck would, or trailer would, like bottom out as they're coming in. Because you're there to wash your car, you want your car to be nice. The cars shown are your standard cars that are shown on developments for stacking. Yes, trucks can be longer, and it is intended to wash your typical trucks that would come through, especially in this area. That would be one of the bonuses of having the car wash here, because there's going to be a lot more of those type of vehicles coming through. And as Brock described, you come through, you go through the pay station, and then if you don't want to wash your car, you take that bail lane right there, what they call it, and you can just vacuum your car that day, and then leave the parking lot area, or you go through the tunnel and then vacuum your car. There'll be signage and at that entrance so that the exit is not blocked. The cars should be staying on the right-hand side of that entryway, to make their kind of right turn into the pay station area.
Making that exit where you had said that you obviously would say do not enter, something of that verbiage. That looks like it may be only wide enough for one vehicle anyways.
It is, yes. It's just for the exit only of the parking area.
I had another question, if that's right, Chairman. You'd said trailer as well. Are they able to tow a trailer through this car wash?
They are, yes.
Okay.
And I don't know the exact height of the car wash. That you got me on that one, but sure. I can find that out. And speaking to the traffic, just a little, I was a traffic engineer in a previous life. I left that life, but the ITE manual on a PM peak for a Saturday, they don't have great numbers for car washes, but it's 40 cars in and out, which would technically be 20 cars in an hour. And as I stated, the car wash tends to run at 1 car per minute. So it can handle 60, which again, if it rained the day before, it can be way more than that, as 20 cars in that hour, and it can run at that rate. And if it does start to back up, they can speed up the chain. They can go up to 2 cars per minute. They don't like to, though. They tend to keep it at 1 car per minute to get the better wash. So that's why that attendant is there, to kind of monitor if there are issues, to speed up the chain possibly, or help someone at the pay station if they're backing up traffic, or backing up or slowing down the pay station.
Sorry, Chairman, if it's okay, I'm kind of stuck on this trailer deal here. So how long of a trailer would it accommodate?
That's another question I'd have to double check with.
The angle of this corner is not going to accommodate a very large trailer.
Mm-hmm. The turn in?
Yes. The turn in and the turn towards the car wash.
Yeah, that's correct. If there's other cars especially adjacent to you, correct, it could not happen. So it's not the typical situation that they're looking at, or that we design to. When we do turning radiuses, we run trucks through. Mm-hmm. We'll run a car, and then we'll run typically a bigger vehicle, and then we'll have to run the emergency vehicles. And they, of course, don't make that turn. They go into the site, and they can mount the curb, too, so they can access the site.
I'm really stuck on the trailer size. Like, I really want to know what kind of, or what length and trailer can take this corner, because if it can't, and a trailer does get stuck, that's obviously going to be...
The corner at the top?
Correct. Yeah, we'll say it takes a 19-foot trailer. I'm just shooting in the dark here. I'm just giving you a scenario, and we get 3 of them in there. That's
pretty long, and they probably don't intend for that to happen. Sure. But that would be a unique scenario where right, the attendant maybe has to go out and stop everybody for a minute, allows him to get around. Again, that would be unique because they don't want that to happen because they don't want to slow down.
We're talking like camper trailer
progress
type thing, right? Or like a utility
we was
trailer?
Looking at more like a smaller U-Haul type behind trailer. And again, we run some of those scenarios in our CAD program as a worst case scenario, or unique case scenario too.
Out of curiosity, does this entertain the idea of campers?
I don't know the answer to that either. I'll have to find that one out for you. That's a good question, though. And to speak a little bit to the water usage, as I said, they do have 4 1,500-gallon reclamation tanks to recycle the water. And if you, their usage is 17 gallons, actually 17.33 gallons per car. So even if you figure the 20 cars for 12 hours a day, which wouldn't be the case, you know, you're at like 4,100 gallons. So you still have even some storage in those reclamation tanks that you're pumping, and that's where the oil water separator is. So they're fairly large tanks that sit out front to try to minimize water usage and the demand on the sanitary system.
Travis, it sounds like in order for you to move on or move forward, there's more information that is needed.
I think just with the whole trailer in the corner thing, and it's not necessarily leaving the word trailer, I think just the ability to understand how sharp this corner is, I guess, and it doesn't show a degree on here that I can see, and, you know, I may have lack of eyesight here.
You're talking about the one at the top, right?
Yeah,
It's
so-
15-foot radius on the inside, and then the outside is 30 foot.
Okay. So if you did get a trailer through, you know, we'll say there's, you know, a 10-foot utility trailer, and it has to be ushered through, I guess, for lack of a better term, is it able to make the corner? How high does it accommodate through the car wash? I'm worried about congestion on the road, essentially, in long story short. I'm worried about folks waiting with, you know, even if they're waiting for utility trailers, and we'll say this, get in this unique situation of you hauling a trailer, or, you know, 16 vehicles already being in there and 3 trailers waiting on the outside of the road, that congestion worries me.
So just to speak a little bit to the traffic, kind of thinking it backwards, right? So if you've gotten rid of those cars that are up in front of the pay station, so you still have some stacking. So you've just taken out 4, 5, 6 cars. So you still have stacking for 10 cars. And again, if I kind of go back to the ITE as the best mark for traffic generation, you got 20 cars in, approximately 20 cars in, 20 cars out in that Saturday peak hour, which would typically be their busiest time on a Saturday after a rain, right? You have the whole hour then for those 20 cars to be coming in and stacking, where you have a stacking still for 10, and it moves 1 car per minute. So the cars are coming through at a decent pace.
Jim? Mr. Chair, can you focus in on the exit to the facility?
Right here, Commissioner.
No, from the exit of the tunnel itself.
Car wash.
Is that radius as well a 15-foot?
It is. That's their standard on all their car washes. They have to have a certain tangent coming out, and then a certain radius is their prototype that accommodates the vehicles that come out of the car wash.
The concern there being in similar vein to Commissioner Travis down here, if somebody were to get stuck, it's not so impactful other than to traffic on the incoming side of the tunnel, but the exit of the tunnel creates a little bit more of a safety hazard. If those large trucks or truck with trailer were to get stuck there, with an automated system pushing, that is probably the worst case scenario.
Right,
So-
and that's why they have the attendants for situations like that. And again, I would have to double check what is too long of something behind a vehicle that could come through. I'd imagine you can't have, like you said, 19-foot trailer behind it, or, you know, even maybe a 10-foot, because now you're 30-foot long. You have a pinch point, but we typically don't run that type of vehicle even through our auto turns for a site, so.
Do you have other car washes around here in similar fashion?
No, we're just starting to come out to the west, Montana a little bit. I believe this is the first one in Idaho, so coming out to this area, starting to move. The main started in Georgia, and it's filtering in the Midwest a little bit. And now out west, we're working on several in Montana, and like I said, first one in Idaho.
Okay.
Chairman?
Yes.
I think I'd feel more comfortable just having those specs, understanding what the congestion, worst possibility could be. I know from my point of view, I just don't, I guess I don't understand the whole trailer thing and the corner taking, like you mentioned, the exit. I think I never even looked at that, but that's a good point as well. Yeah, that's just my opinion.
So, Mr. Chair, can I ask a question? So the other ones you have in Georgia and other states, I guess I'm still kind of flabbergasted why I've never seen a trailer in a car wash before in my life. So based on the history that you,
Maybe I misspoke to what you're thinking of as a trailer or a camper, and what I was thinking of as some, people put smaller items in a trailer behind a car. That was what I was thinking of, because I knew how long, we pulled our auto turns through. So again, I may have misspoke on that side, because when you're saying trailer or a camper,
yeah, but,
I don't believe they'd accommodate a pull-behind camper.
so your definition of trailer is just like a 4x6 or something small?
That, like a U-Haul type, and again, that's because that's what I use, so.
I guess I've never seen a trailer in a car wash before.
I haven't either, but that was
Yeah.
my question, and that's why I wanted to clarify before we decided to launch.
And I can definitely clarify that for Brock and give even show you the truck turn radiuses on a piece of paper, like what car, the large SUV or whatever
Sure.
coming through. So you can watch them, their vehicle path turn through the whole thing, because we have to look at that for,
Chairman, if it's okay. I'm not necessarily super stuck on the whole truck and SUV. I guess if you know Mountain Home, there's a lot of trucks here. It's getting 15 of them stacked up that makes me nervous, I guess. And if you've ever seen, the newer styles, wider wheels, less of a turn radius. Yeah, that'd be great information to have.
Okay, Mr. Chair, at this point, would it behoove us to put this, I guess, put it on hold until we get that information?
You do have those options. You could table it. I don't know the type of communication that the applicant has. Well, what I should say, what the representative has with the applicant, whether or not she could be able to secure that information before the end of the meeting. That's something else that you could look at. It just really depends on.
Something else, Travis, I just thought about to consider is approving the conditional use permit based with the assumption or with the condition of knowing those turn radiuses and that it will work from the applicant. So we could still approve the condition with the condition of knowing that those turn radiuses are going to handle whatever vehicle load's going to be in there. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'd definitely be stuck on the trailer thing as well. I know I'm a broken record here, but I need to know whether there's going to be a trailer on the back of it or not, or even if that's a thing, I guess.
Would be part of the motion then, to add that to the end.
Possibly. Can you get the information?
I can try, yes, I can try, and I know they don't want to table it because the land sale is all contingent upon, this tonight, and if it gets tabled, I know that can probably change some things, but I can try to find out that information as far as how the questions that you want. I'll verify the trailer, if it's what it's capable of, and I can look at the turning the radiuses of the curbs are on there.
Yeah, and I see that now. It's very, very
Yeah.
small.
And if there's something else you want me to verify,
No,
I can.
I think,
Is that the main
honestly,
thing
I
with the
think,
trailer?
I think the appeasing of the trailer would probably
Okay.
make it a sound thing for me.
Okay, with that then, would you
I will try.
be
yes.
okay if we moved you to the end and we'll come back to you?
Yeah, that'd be
Yeah.
great. Mhm,
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. With that then, we'll just move on to our next action item of conditional use permit for off-premises signs. This is by Mr. Ron Cox. It's a request for a conditional use permit to allow for a 2 15-foot by 6-foot off-premises single-faced advertising signs to be located at 404 North Main Street in Mountain Home, Idaho. Mr. Chair.
Alrighty, Mr. Chair, may I address the Commissioner.
Yes, sir.
So, just by way of disclosing, I did advise Mr. Fitzer from our office that should this come up and require some sort of legal opinion, just want the members of the commission to be aware of the fact that your legal counsel was one of Mr. Cox's customers during the primary election. That doesn't affect my legal analysis of this, and it doesn't affect me in any way, because I can make my own sign, don't need to necessarily have this one approved. I'm not counting on it for the general election, but I just wanted you to be aware of that, and then if you want someone else to give you legal advice, if you need to, there are other people in our office that can do that. But I don't believe I'm biased. I believe I can measure how many square feet a sign is as good as an expert.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Sherry.
Thank you. So for our newer commissioners, sign code is something, and signs in general isn't something they really teach you in planning school. Because it's a land use, but it isn't. But basically, what our sign code allows the city to do, allows us to regulate the place and manner of what signs can go where. And I'm pretty sure we're going to have many more trainings in the future about sign code, and we may even see some changes to our sign code. But our sign code as of present has a definition for an off-premises sign, which is signage which illustrates goods or services for a location where it's posted which are not present there. And what Mr. Cox is asking is for the opportunity to have reoccurring off-premise signage at the subject property within your application. So what we're going to do is we'll have him come up and kind of say, hey, this is, kind of give a brief summary of what he's anticipating to do, and then we will ask for any questions.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Rob?
Thank you for this opportunity. So I own a building there at 404 North Main Street, and I've had signs posted there that in the past that have advertised various things like the Elmore County Fair, Parks and Recreation, city events, things like that, as well as political candidates for various positions, and seems like it's a very good location to get word out to the community. We would like to have the opportunity to, like Brock said, have off-premise signs advertised for businesses, ideally local businesses that would like to get the word out there as well. I have been in contact with the Idaho Transportation Department that said that I can't submit an application with them until I get this approved, but once this is approved, then they don't foresee anything that they can't guarantee until they have an application. I've gone through the regulations and the code for things that it's not allowed to have glare, odor, noise, vibration, those kinds of things. I don't foresee any kind of issue with that. These aren't going to be illuminated signs. They're just going to be banners that are connected to the side of a building that normally would just be a big blank white building. They would be maintained in good condition. If there was any conditional issues, they would be taken down immediately. I would like to make sure that they are, I don't want to phrase it, appeasing, that because they are going to not only represent Cox Signs and our ability, but also it's going to be representative of the city, and people coming to the city are going to see these signs, and I want them to be professional and look good. And we would like to continue to promote events, as well as businesses. I don't want to just go strictly, businesses. We've also done holiday messages, and we'll also use it to promote Cox Signs that hopefully will, in the near future, be utilizing that building. Okay, is there any questions?
Chairman? Yep. Mr. Cox, first, thank you. I've noticed over the years you've had signage up there regarding graduations, things like that, so thank you for doing that for the community.
Especially this year was the first year that we didn't have the graduates, and I tried to work to get connected with somebody to be able to put the graduates up, and that just didn't work out, and so I decided we needed to do something. So I tried to work with the Senior Celebration Committee, and together we were able to put up something to congratulate them.
So thank you for that.
Thank you.
For Mr. Cherry, is there any, I noticed in the packet we're discussing location in C2. Under the codes, there's not anything listed as far as limitations of size, what have you, through C2 in the downtown corridor
No.
for off-site?
No, and what is present? So we have two specific components that speak to signs. We have one which is black and white zoning ordinance, which says that any off-premise sign, conditional use permit, and the size, manner, what have you, can be dictated during the conditional use permit process. And I think it's important to look at the intent. I highlighted that, and I kind of made that something for you to see. And I also think it's important to look at what the comprehensive plan has to say, not only about signage, but also about our community gateways. This is where people come into Mountain Home, and it's part of our identity. Signs are hard. They're not my favorite thing. My only recommendation that I have to you as a planner, being that it's a gateway, it's part of our identity, and these signs can be part of placemaking. I can totally see someone being like, hey, meet me by the big graduation sign, or meet me by the big whatever sign, and it becomes part of the identity of downtown. I'm able to see those placemaking components. But what's most important to me, given the efforts by both business owners, by the city, by the Urban Renewal Agency for downtown, is that things are kept neat. And I would only recommend that if this is something that you choose to recommend approval to the city council, that it would be that the sign shall be kept neat, clean, and in good repair. And if they are ever in disrepair, that there's a condition that we can simply contact Mr. Cox and say, remove them, and have them replaced. Other than that, I'm able to see both sides. Our code doesn't want the proliferation of more signage. We want to be Mountain Home. We don't necessarily want to be the strip and say, look at me, look at me, look at me, and create safety issues. But that's at your discretion at the moment.
I'm so sorry to interrupt. If you are here for the airport board meeting, we've moved it over to the Economic Development Office, and I can show you that way now. For the airport board meeting?
Yes.
Come on up. Sorry, guys.
Thank you.
Meetings.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
I'll show you guys 30.
Mr. Chair, I have one question. He said it won't be illuminated. What if again, I commend you because the high school stuff is awesome, but what if he wants to put a light on it at a later date? 'Cause it's great to see it during the day, but at night, being the gateway and what you're saying, what if he chose to put a non-blaring light that just illuminates that? Would he have to go through this process again, or?
So if I can recall correctly, and I would have to look at the conditional use permit code, because the conditional use permit, I believe it says if it's expanded or modified or materially changed in any such way, that the applicant would probably need to come back. What the applicant is showing you is, and it's one of the good things about a conditional use permit, is this is exactly what we are getting. This is exactly what it looks like. These are the parameters. These are the materials. I would have to defer to the conditional use permit code again, but I want to say perhaps yes. He would be required to come back through this process if he was to add to the square footage that he's doing and or add a component such as lighting. but I'm not completely sure, but that's where my gut is leaning.
And the only reason I ask that,
Without
just for
reviewing
future use, you know, say this takes off and da-da-da, and it's just, at night, it's not visible and it's not doing what it's intended to do, so I don't wanna create a bureaucratic.
Well, I believe, and I'm kind of with Mr. Chair on this, my understanding is if you change anything of the conditions in which are approved, you have to come back through and reapply for the conditions, a new condition
Of that.
of whatever it is that is. Yep.
And that may not be your wish, sir, I just kind of thinking out loud on that.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I'm not opposed to the idea of illuminating them. It's just at this time.
Yeah.
You know, obviously they would not be illuminated.
I'm going to have you step back for a minute. And with that, I will open up the public hearing. Anybody who would like to speak to the signs? Okay, seeing none, I'll go ahead and close the public hearing for that. And commission, it is now up to you.
There's no questions, Mr. Chair, I make a motion.
I have one, please. Can you clarify the light, please?
So if you want to put as a condition that they're not illuminated, so you,
I would say just go back through the process.
well, so what the task before you is to approve a conditional use permit for off-premises signs, and your condition would be, we'll approve these off-premises signs so long as there are those two on the side of the building and they're not illuminated.
Okay.
And then, yeah, and then if you choose to come back and want to illuminate the off-premises, and again, there's a difference, the definition of off-premises sign is for a business that's not.
However, so question on that, I think Mr. Ronnie, he mentioned that the future is that he would possibly own that or move into there at one point. That's not then necessarily an off-premise sign then.
No, so if he's advertising Cox Signs and puts a big banner that says Cox Signs, that's not an off-premise. But if he has another one below it that says, you know, Red Pile Whiskey Company, just put too fine a point on it, there was a sign that was literally an off-premises sign for a brew company in Mountain Home. That's an off-premises sign.
Okay.
So if you opened the Blue Pit Brewing Company there, then he could put that sign up.
Got it, okay.
So the idea is turning a building into a billboard.
Yep.
Right? That's what it's designed to regulate.
Okay.
So if you can put that condition that they be not illuminated, that prevents them from being,
I'm sorry.
Real quick, if you're here,
Airport board meeting?
if you're here for the airport board meeting, they have moved it over to the economic development meeting area, correct?
Yes, and I can show you that way. Sir, are you part of the airport board?
Yeah, I was gonna.
Okay.
You over here?
Yes, it's down over this way. Amy pointed you out to me, so.
That sounds pretty interesting.
competing board meetings.
I know. Okay,
So I'm okay with that conditional use in there.
okay. Any questions here?
Mr. Chair?
Something else? Do I need to come up there if I wanted to?
We'll have to close.
Yeah.
You have to close.
It is closed.
Did you close? Okay.
So, I guess, like, my question is like say I was going to illuminate them right now, would it be unapproved if I was illuminated? I mean, can I apply for, at this time, they're not going to be illuminated, but they may be in the future? And then,
You're getting into a hairy situation on that one. If my guess is, and
that way it alleviates having to come back and go through the entire process of public
would you then,
notice and-
wouldn't he then have to go in and reapply
Well,
for a
this is
conditional?
where, if I have had the opportunity to review, and I trust Mr. Cox, he does very good work, but to protect the integrity of downtown and everything that's there, I believe that the conditional use gives us the assurity of the types of materials and touch of light and the type of lighting that's going to be applied. And our city doesn't have historic design standards. We don't have any of that. I'm not saying that you should base it on that, but based on what I found in the comprehensive plan, it's not a bad thing. Adding, the ability for him to do lighting this late in the game.
What zone is this?
C2.
It says right here. Fascia or wall signs, indirect or internal. Projecting sign, indirect or internal. Canopy, indirect or internal. So this is kind of like your car wash thing. So the part of this that triggers the public use is the off-site portion of it. Directional business sign, indirect. So this describes the type of illumination that's permitted in the C1, in the C2 zone.
Okay.
Alley signs or fascia, indirect or internal. Monument signs, indirect, internal, or floodlight. Freestanding pole or monument, indirect or internal. Under canopy, indirect or internal. Canopy, indirect or internal.
So Jeff, these are permitted, correct?
Yeah, so
He doesn't need a commission, he doesn't need a conditional use permit for lighting if it's permitted.
If the sign said Cox Signs, an on-premises sign.
Right.
Then the degree of illumination that's permitted in the C2 zone is as I have just described.
Right.
So the conditional use permit part of this is if he's permitted to also advertise for those businesses that are not located on the site. Then you would then defer to the illumination standards in the C2 zone. That's what I'm getting
Yep,
at.
Mr. Schroeder's correct.
So the degree of illumination, and I think what they're probably hinting at and what they're trying to make sure that you're aware of and that the members of the commission and the members of the public are aware of, we're not going to have a big animated LCD TV like is on the freeway, right? So you're going to cast some light on the sign.
So could we say that the conditional use is that if it was to be illuminated, that it would need to be the permittable illumination for that zone?
So the way I am reading all of this is the conditional use permit is specifically for the off-site signage.
Okay.
Other than that, once it comes to the illumination, if it's a C2, you're permitted on whatever the C2 illumination is, and that's kind of what
I
we
just wanted,
reference.
because in my write-up, I specifically said they were not going to be illuminated.
Yep.
And so I wanted to make sure that if they were illuminated later, that we didn't have to go through everything again. But,
According to what Mr. Schroeder just said, nope, we would fall back on whatever C2 is permitted.
okay, thank you. Any other questions for me?
Nope.
Then I'll step back.
I do have a quick question
Oh, yes.
regarding the location of the signage in terms of the intent for the signage. Are you primarily advertising Cox Signs, or is this going to be a mini ad agency in terms of like you being able to sell that ad space?
I mean, the idea is to sell the ad space and to use it for non-off-premise signs like events, and political candidates, things like that, promotion.
So
And-
if Blue Crit Brewing, just say, for example, said, hey, Mr. Cox, would you mind making a sign for me and putting it up on that spot, and I'll give you, whatever you're renting that space for. That's kind of like what your idea is, correct?
That's the off-premise sign aspect that we're looking to be able to do.
Okay.
But in addition, we also will have other non-off sign. There could be promotions for Cox Signs if this, if it's empty and it's not being advertised, then I might put something up that says, hey, we're having a banner sale, kind of thing. Which would not be an off-premise sign, but, yeah, so both.
Also, Mr. Chair, for Mr. Cherry, is there any concern regarding the location of the signage and its proximity to the crosswalk where the youth group building for the church comes across there? I know that youth group utilizes that crosswalk quite a bit. Is that within our scope to query about today?
Yes. Pedestrian safety, and if you look at the intent of the sign code, it specifically talks about that and its intent. Like, is this going to be a potential component which could create accidents or end up creating distraction? In my opinion, I believe we have other similar signage or other similar components which are not signage along there that I don't believe hinder pedestrian safety. I am not a safety professional, though, when it comes to vehicular traffic. So I won't pretend to be. However, this one, you could even argue that this is garnered towards pedestrians as well. We have a very large and wide sidewalk, then the building, which has the sign on it. Obviously, yes, it's visible with vehicular traffic, but in my opinion, I don't believe that there is a safety concern.
And at which time we may make recommendation, Mr. Schroeder?
Yeah, specifically to your point, signs in the vision triangle are addressed in paragraph G, 913.6 general provisions of the sign code. And those are the ones that are like down at street level, maybe on a post or something on the side of the building. But specifically, it discusses animated signs, and this is where I thought we were, anyway, where you were concerned, which is not contemplated by the applicant, would be basically a big giant TV screen. That would be a distraction. And the animated sign restrictions cover that. Can't be conjunction non-residential. Location and placement will not endanger motorists or pedestrians and does not cause undue distraction to traffic on the adjacent street. So yeah. One that's dull, that just has a blowhard political candidate, isn't likely to distract anyone. The candidate may be driving by.
Okay.
Thank you.
Commissioner, any other questions?
Yeah, I have one. It's supposed to be approved by ITD, right? Regardless, from this point forward, just to appease your idea.
It appears so for the applicant.
Okay.
Commissioner, I'll entertain a motion.
I'd like to make a motion, Mr. Chairman.
Really?
Request a conditional use permit to allow off-premise signs on building located 404 North Main Street. With the following conditions, signs shall be kept neat, clean, and good repair. If signs are faded, frayed, neglect, ripped, torn, or partial or wholly ruined, or any similar state of disrepair shall be removed.
Okay, first I have a second. Second. All right, second. Travis?
Aye.
Billy? Aye. Christina?
Aye.
Scott? Aye. Aye for me as well. Motion passes. I've never had so many questions on signs in my life. I'm just going to say that right now. But
pretty
good
rare
conversation, and I like how you guys are getting in it, so that's good stuff. All right, our next item on the list is a planned unit development for a rezone from an R4 to an R4 PUD for the Lincoln Square Apartments. The applicant of the Titan Properties LLC. It's a request to rezone the R4 to an R4 planned unit development. Would allow for a master plan development providing 24 two-bedroom, two-bath units in one 3-story building. Amenities include assigned-covered tenant parking, community pavilion, playground, and walking path. The site is approximately 0.716 acres and is located just east of the adjacent to the Lincoln Square Apartments and south and directly behind the Dollar Tree. Mr. Cherry.
Alrighty, before I hand this over to the applicant, this is a application for a planned unit development. Note that our planned unit development ordinance says that if you're under 3 acres, you are unable to submit. However, there's a caveat. The city council has discretion to allow you to submit if you meet different criteria, being infill, you are a problem property, what have you. This one has been infill, and they have received approval from city council in order to submit. Not approve, but for the opportunity to submit what is before you today. So everyone is aware, this is a expansion of the existing Lincoln Square Apartments. It is directly to the west of the Lincoln Square Apartments, just north of the field, which is the, I want to say, high school. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to the applicant's representative, Mr. Taryn Mitchell, to do the presentation, and I'll fill in any holes that are there afterwards.
I'll have to pass out handouts, by chance. Two sheets.
Thank you.
Before we begin, there was a little bit of a dig at architects, so I'm going to have to say we don't like to be called engineers. Our profession's 8,000 years old.
Oh my goodness.
So, Mr. Chair, Commissioners, City Staff, we appreciate the opportunity to present to you Lincoln Square, the proposed Lincoln Square Apartments 2. for your consideration. What is that? What was that?
The overlay.
Control enter. I don't have a pointer, but I think I don't want to shine anybody in the eyes. Is that hitting anybody? Okay. So, I think it best to start by, again, thanking you for the opportunity to present. And before we jump into the presentation, I'd like to introduce our esteemed guest here. So this is our community investor, Brian Van Manen. Would you please introduce yourself and state a little bit about you?
Yeah, thank you for the time. So my name is Brian, and I've been a community investor here for 6 years. Purchased the Lincoln Square Apartments August of 16, and when we first purchased those, there's 11 buildings in that complex, so there's 11 fourplex buildings, 44 units. When we first purchased it, there were multiple owners in that complex, and so we went through the process of working with the other existing owners and purchasing all those buildings. So we own all 11 buildings that are in that complex, and we've done that for a majority of those 6 years.
Could you state your full name for the record and address, please?
Yeah, so Brian Van Manen, and my home address,
Whichever.
yeah, is 1878 G Ranch in Kuna, Idaho. So we acquired those 6 years ago, and we have continued to see strong demand for those units within the community, also supporting the military. And we, especially in the last 2 to 3 years, have continued to have a waiting list for any vacancies that we have. Out of the 44 units as of today, like we have a vacancy, one vacancy right now. We do have a waiting list for that vacancy. So there is a very strong demand in the community that we're trying to support and continue to grow when it's, the right growth in the right area. And so we are, proposing this Phase 2 or Lincoln Square Complex 2 to support this infill development. So,
thank you, Brian.
Yep.
So I'll jump into where it's located. Believe all of you have received the packet. I tend to provide a lot of information in the packet, so I will go through it fairly quickly to allow for questions. So this is where it's located. The proposed investment is located. For those that have a little bit more time on the commission, I do like to offer a bit of a primer. We know that we're in dire need of housing in Mountain Home, and we have a lot of things approved, but really nothing built. And so there really is very little alleviation of the housing crisis that we have. And some of you have seen this graphic. This is the most recent that I was able to find was from 2018. This is your annual salary that you would have to make in order to afford an average home in your state. So that is now 4 years old. This graphic on the right is more current, and it states the average rent in Metro Boise, our most comparable area. We're seeing 30 to, Ms. Drake would probably even know better than I, we're seeing 30-35% increases year to year, and I think it's the last 3 years. Is that correct? So it's a trajectory that just isn't good or conducive. So this particular proposal, as Mr. Van Manen stated, is really an expansion of an existing apartment complex. They approached me about a year ago and said, we're at capacity all the time and we have a wait list. Is it possible to expand? They were able to contact the landowner for this parcel, and who was eager and willing to sell. And we went before the city and asked them, well, this is what we're proposing. What do you think? What kind of pitfalls do we have? And of course, they do a very thorough job of discussing access. So this particular parcel qualified, I believe, by City Council for PUD, even though it's not 3 acres, because it is in a lot that has never been developed, that is really stuck behind 2 big box buildings. That makes it really not very conducive for commercial because you can't see it. And it makes it difficult for residential if it were on its own. And that lends itself to an expansion of the existing, wherein we would have, and you'll see in just a moment, we'll have our existing easement, ingress and egress easement, and then a connection here to Lincoln Square. I'll quickly go through what the current conditions are. So this one was taken in November last year, and you'll see some that are taken just a few days ago. And so the first one is looking towards 18th, and so to the east. This one is looking to the north. This one will be looking west. And you can see that there is, for those that are familiar, there's quite a lot of underutilized space as well in the parking lot. Okay, so this right here on the end, this would be the lot in question, the parcel in question. And that is a little bit closer to the fence, but would be an opening and then the proposed construction. There we go. This is the current access through, and this would be utilized more for emergency vehicles. And we want to make sure that we're not saturating, I would say. It's a 24-foot drive. We checked with Brian Reed, our fire marshal, and he said there isn't any problem there. But we want to make sure that we're cognizant of the commercial uses as well. Okay, this is a stormwater retention in the back and in the corner of the existing Lincoln Square Apartments. So I'm standing right behind the Dollar Tree. There we go. This is the lot. Okay, and here's setback across American Legion. And this would be a comparable view once it's developed. Okay, and so the site plan, I'll focus in on, again, it's on the main highlights. It's a single building with 24 units. It's 3 stories is what we're proposing. There will be 30 on-site parking stalls, which is less than a 2-to-1, or 2 stalls per unit ratio, but we can get to a 2-stall ratio with a reconfiguration of the existing Lincoln Square Apartments. And so we can get to that 2-unit mark. There is covered parking provided, and something that I like to highlight, I know that water is a concern, and come enough to these meetings and meetings with the county, and you hear it over and over and over again. And there are a number of reports provided by Idaho Water Resources, as well as SPF engineers and Keller Associates, some others. And as a way to reduce the amount of water consumption and still provide housing that we desperately need, we're proposing water conservation landscaping throughout. I won't talk about it at length at this time unless you have questions about it, but that is the landscaping, and it meets the city requirements for landscaping and screening. And this would be the changes, the proposed changes with Lincoln Square the number 2, phase 2, expansion into existing, and then better utilization of parking so we can meet our 2-to-1 ratio, as well as children's playground and or pavilion. in that existing stormwater detention area. So mentioned site landscaping and how important it is for us to use native vegetation. So all the vegetation that's proposed is native to southwest Idaho. These particular images are taken from BLM, from University of Idaho, and are all those that they deem suitable for this region, because once they get established, you can actually turn the water off so that they don't require watering. And we will have, there's no buffalo grass, Mr. Schroeder may like that, proposed for this, but it's certainly something that, that we may entertain for the existing stormwater detention area. Uses 1/10 the amount of water that the native, or excuse me, non-native, the non-native Kentucky bluegrass and rye and fescue mix that we have here commonly. Okay, this will be a bird's eye view of what's proposed and shows the building in relation to really what is a beautiful park. My son's on the soccer team, so I'm here quite a lot, and so get a nice view. I spend my time pacing back and forth most of the time, but I do spend a lot of time here. This would be a view to just to the side of Dollar Tree. And we're also proposing, we live in a windy area, and unfortunately I bought a house that was built in the 90s, and the fence has blown over recently with the wind. And so a means to avoid that is to do what many others in the area are doing, and you have galvanized steel posts in the ground, and then you have a separation between horizontal wood slats that allows a pretty sizable amount of the air to get through, the wind to get through without having such a high wind load. And so this would be the first floor plan. It is they are all 2-bedroom, 2-bath apartments. They all have laundry or laundry hookups. And so it would be something that I know that the military has mentioned a number of times is what they're looking for. Second floor. These are a garden-style apartment, meaning that there's no interior condition corridor, and so it is protected underneath the roof, but that's where the stairs are. And so it allows for comfort, allows for wind passage, and it happens to provide a really nice area as well for the community and the residents. This will be the third floor. I'll show just a few more renderings. All right, and Brian, you have anything to add?
No, thank you, and yeah, appreciate your time and support.
Yeah, we'll have you step back.
The joke was going to put buffalo grass in another project. I told him buffalo weren't allowed.
Go ahead and open up the public hearing for this, for the planned unit development to rezone an R4 to an R4 PUD for the Lincoln Square Apartments. Go ahead, come on up. Need your full name and address, please.
My name is Karen Halligan, 150 South Cliff East. I'm just curious, okay, so by the dollar store, there's an emergency access. The access to those apartments, is it coming off from 18th from the west side? Mm-hmm. I'm just trying to figure out the roads.
Yeah, no, you have to address the commission. Ma'am, you have to address the commission. Well, I know. I know. We'll ask those questions.
There are roses now. Yeah, that's what I was concerned about. I was just, because, that I hate that Dollar Tree store parking lot. And if you notice, I'm not sure what's in the building next to it now, but there's like a little manhole where people try to get around through that traffic there, that you actually go off-road. you know, in some instances to make it through there. I don't know. Like I said, I don't
Yep,
go there.
no, good questions.
All right, I was just curious about that.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay.
Commissioners, Misty Pierce again. I'm just asking you to please take in consideration the EDUs. I always get that tongue-tied. And then the water situation. And then also, at the last city council meeting, it was proposed that we do need a new, some work done to our wastewater facility as well. It's almost at capacity, and it's not going to be pretty if it backs up. So, if you could take that in consideration and possibly put a contingent of if there's water, if there's EDUs for it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
Hi, my name is Brendan McCarthy. I live at 890 East 14th North. I just kind of listening to the developer talk about the plan. One of my big concerns was the parking spots that were going to be allotted for the issue on that. I was really glad to hear that, you know, the developer was into kind of consideration of bringing that to that 2 spots per unit. Because I'm curious, you know, he was talking about how they already currently have 11 buildings, which is 44 units. That's 88 spots currently. Well, if the current plan that's showing here, if you're putting 30 stalls, you know, just off of that new development, you're 18 cars short or spots already. So just trying to figure out, you know, what that kind of deficit looks at right now versus before going to that 2 point for those vehicles, because, you know, they're talking about they're always at capacity and everything like that. You know, I know he had shown previous pictures of the cars and everything during time. I'm kind of curious what time of the day, because I've driven by there a couple times and it's like, looks pretty full sometimes. So, but yeah, like I said, that's just really my main concern is the parking issue on that. So thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you. Anybody else? Okay, seeing none, I'll go ahead and close the public hearing for that then. Commission, Tara, I'm gonna go ahead and call you back up. So the first thing that Karen mentioned was the dollar store driveway. I was a concern of mine as well. You said it was a 24-foot. You said it was emergency vehicles. Is that going to have some kind of barrier where nobody can drive through? It's only for emergency vehicles, or how are you going to assure that that is not going to be used as a consistent right-of-way?
So the concern is certainly a valid one, and it was discussed at length, excuse me, with the fire marshal. They don't want a crash chain or a barrier there at all. And so that's something that we volunteered, a mechanism to stop just regular traffic there, but they would like to have it open. And so there's, as you all know, there's really no way that we can just stop them. As part of the lease agreement, they can be instructed not to drive through there, through that access easement. But the easement is there for this parcel, if that makes sense. So the access to the site is generally for that, or through that easement and for that parcel.
Who owns that easement? Do you know?
What was that?
Who owns that easement? Do you know?
Well, the easement is the, I do, it's on the list there, but it's the company or the developer that owns, the franchisee of the Dollar Tree.
Okay.
Owns that portion right there.
That portion right there. Okay. And have you had any conversations with that company or that person about that easement and using it specifically, maybe potentially for traffic?
There's been some discussion. There's been quite a bit of research for the property itself. There are a number of existing easements, and like for sewer, and there's a water easement. That drive lane itself has sewer and water and access, and so they're aware that that parcel was for sale, and there would be development there. And there wasn't any concern that was brought to our attention.
Okay. Commission?
I wanted to touch on Misty's point with the EDUs. So it's my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but once we use the allotted amount, this is a big concern of mine as well. So, because I know we're at the precipice of breaking between the third drill hole here and no water in general, but once we fill those, they're full. So once they're completed, we'll say the allotted amount being 1,000. Once the 1,000's full, you don't fill anymore. So these folks would sit vacant basically until the water was available. Is that correct?
That is correct, and that's what's most difficult about the EDU discussion. Obviously, Miss Pearson's correct. We don't want to write a check that we can't cash. But at the end of the day, too, even with the approvals, if they're recommended approval by this body and they're approved by city council, and then they do all their designs, and they go through all that, there's still a chance that it may not come to fruition. Which is why EDUs are taken into account and actually removed off of our big numeric slate of what we have and what we don't at that point. So, and that's something that I believe the developer is aware of. It's a first come, first serve. That doesn't mean that we should be foolish and, have someone come in that has 5,000 homes and say you are approved. That is something to take into consideration. But Commissioner Agnes, ultimately, the EDUs are off the table once they get to building permit. At this preliminary stage, there's still the chance that the project doesn't come to fruition, and that happens, and it's normal. I'm crossing my fingers for everyone. I hope everyone has success, but that is ultimately when we do not have EDUs. So yes, we are in a negative if you want to call them EDUs spoken for or EDUs for projects approved, but when it comes for EDUs which are truly assigned to development, we are still in a sizable.
Kind of put it in the layman's terms, the EDUs are there until someone finally starts building.
Bingo.
Yep.
So if I can, so we'll say we filled 1,000. I'm just throwing the number out there. That's not from anything I know statistically, but we'll say that we fill those and those are all full. Would this halt construction, or would somebody decide to build and then it would be vacant?
We wouldn't be able to allow the building permit. So they wouldn't even build without us having the EDUs there.
Right, so it would be a vacant lot or whatever it may be.
It would be a vacant lot. It wouldn't be a vacant building. They wouldn't build and it'd be a vacant building.
Okay.
If the order of operations is correctly administered, they would come in for a building permit and we would say, sorry, we don't have any water and or sewer, and I guess I'd have a call to legal and we'd figure stuff out, and we neither do we want to get to that point either. It's just a little bit more complex than looking at what we've approved versus what we haven't. There's multiple things to look at.
With that, on kind of a separate note, is there any way for us to, again, get a updated amount of what's been approved and what is still there? I know Mr. Urquidy gave it to us once. I'd like to get another updated. That'd be possible. Okay, thank you. Good, yeah. Taryn, talk to us about the parking spots and how you've kind of adjusted to allow for the overflow of what we have, so.
Yep, very good questions and comments and concerns. So to address the first question, and so it's proposed that the main traffic be on 18th. It's really dim, so along 18th, and then entrance into the complex, hence it being an expansion. And this is what would be encouraged for vehicular traffic for the complex itself. Knowing that, again, the price of land, the price of construction materials, when they're available, cost of construction, inflation, the looming specter of a recession, there really are a lot of hurdles to jump. It's a very, very, very difficult market. And one of the ways to mitigate that and still provide the needed housing, if anybody's ever read or keeps up with BoiseDev.com or the Idaho Statesman, they have articles, it's probably every week, that talks about the dire circumstances that we're in. Redfin is having all sorts of problems that collects data on real estate and housing in particular. So we think this is really a very, very good project that could move forward quickly, that will provide the housing. I'm trying to figure out how exactly to say this. Provide the housing that we need immediately, that the Air Force Base and the base commander have said, we need them now. They should have been built yesterday. And they really were very direct. So the parking, knowing that we are trying to maximize the use of a site that has never been utilized and would be underutilized through a different kind of development. I fit as many parking stalls on there, and our engineers will contend as well that it's difficult to squeeze so much into a tight site and make it viable, because you still have stormwater that you have to deal with. And so we have seepage beds and the whole 9 yards, and as many parking stalls as we could get. So I was able to get 30 without reconfiguring anything here. And so the second question is for parking. If you go and you walk, I guess you can drive, but walk in there and just walk around, you'll see that nothing is striped. The stalls themselves are not striped. And so you'll have really a space and a half or 2 spaces with 1 car in it. And so with striping or with a demarcation of some sort that indicates where each parking stall is, I was able to get the desirable 2 parking stalls per unit for the whole complex.
So that's going back through and restriping, and that's
where nothing's been striped. So there would be a reconfiguration, which is why this is shown darker than the rest of it. All of it is restriped, which is why that's dark, but this portion gets redone, where it's not an efficient use of space.
Mr. Chair.
It would be my recommendation, as far as your conditions, if parking is something that is of great concern, that be completed, the restriping, before a certificate of occupancy be issued for one of the proposed units.
Okay.
That would ensure that the necessary parking is in place before the new units are operational. Or habitable, should I say.
Travis?
What is this may be too specific, what's the exact numbers at right at 2? Are you right at 2 with your reconfiguration, or a little bit over, or just right at it, 2.0?
I think it's 2.057 or something like that,
Okay.
so 2.
Okay, and it's mostly a comment, if I can. I would typically, this would alarm me with these types of conditions, and I see why you're asking for it being tucked away in a corner like this and being next to some commercial use and restaurant. Is the 40-foot versus 30-foot, that's living space, or is that architectural? The
It's
increase?
the 3-story based on 2-story.
Okay.
Correct, yeah, exactly.
Okay. That's all I got for now.
Okay. Anybody else?
So just to clarify, right now you have 44 units, and you have 88 spaces that have not been striped. So I'm gonna go back to, I think it was what Mr. Vaughn said about, was it Mr. Vaughn? I think it was, I don't remember who it was. You, sir. We were talking about the 24 then that we're gonna add for the 30. That's not quite 48. And if, I know airmen, they'll probably have 2 vehicles per unit. So how would we, I mean, that doesn't sound like 2 per unit to me. Does that make sense?
I'm gonna go to you on this one when it comes to the parking.
The fast and easy way of ensuring there's parking is we have a condition saying there will be 2 parking spaces off-street, on-site, for what is being proposed and what is existing. That's the easiest way to ensure that regardless of what is illustrated, which I do believe is correct, I'm not faulting Karen at all, but that's probably the greatest safeguard that we have.
Does that answer your question?
I think the hiccup is probably the math, where we're like, okay, we have 88, but that's an unstriped. That's just
Yeah, so then
a number that was thrown out there. You could fit more than that in there, in the existing right now.
Yeah, because I would happen to agree then with that condition that we place upon it, that we would need to have all of those other ones basically striped and defined.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, as well. The discussion of parking is an interesting one. Our market is being treated like Boise. We're not Boise, but it's being treated like it. You're seeing Boise costs, Boise people, demand very similar to that of Boise, and we're seeing costs like development fees that are higher than Boise. And so all of those are a strike against saying that Mountain Home should be different. We should have lots and lots of parking spaces, but everything costs more than what you have in Boise. So I think that perhaps a discussion, a larger discussion to be had is that Boise for a studio and for a studio is only 0.75 parking stalls per unit. It's not even one. 1 bedroom is one parking stall for a 1 bedroom. A 2 bedroom is 1.25. And a 3 bedroom is 1.5. And so what we may run into, and is a concern of mine as an architect, is that by placing demands that are higher than the market that is already overpriced, that's nearest to us, that's comparable, placing demands of greater parking capacity, although I do agree having two stalls per unit makes perfect sense. But the reality is that as cities start to grow, they lower that because they know that you're simply asking an investor to fund for recreational vehicles, for 2 vehicles and things of that nature, for an apartment specifically, is an undue burden, or could be conceived as one.
I would agree to a point in the sense that you stated that we are considered Boise, but we're not Boise. And you're right. However, in Boise, what do you have that we don't have? And that is a lot of close things together, right? So you cut down parking spaces because a lot of people got mass transit, they're doing bikes, they're walking because everything isn't within that area. In Mountain Home, if you have airmen, they're not biking to the airbase. So you have that kind of parking for a reason in that sense, especially when it comes to developments such as apartments and things like that. So I totally understand, Boise being 1.25, 1.3, whatever it might be, because of the density of that area and the closeness that everything is there, plus the mass transit that they have. They even have the rent scooters that you can do now inside there. We just don't have that in the way, so we have to make sure that we are sustainable in that parking for people who are quite further away in distance.
But you did mention airmen, and so if the airmen are traveling from Boise, and they still have a reduced parking load, it's something that I think we should have a greater discussion about.
Interesting, yeah. That'd be interesting to have a conversation about where those airmen come from.
I think we have 800 roughly right now that are commuting to Boise every day.
Yeah.
One other consideration is in the 6 years that we have had the buildings, we haven't had any parking issues. You can see, we don't even have the current parking stripe, which lends to, we just haven't had any parking issues at all that have been escalated up to us or that we've had to resolve. So we've had sufficient parking for the existing complex there. with extra.
I would agree that I think that condition though on to make sure we stripe, before the new development is occupational, and absolutely. Philip?
Mark, I know this came up in a previous meeting. For our code or standard, we don't have a set standard, because I wanted to say 1.88 we discussed. in the
So I
previous meeting.
believe that was a figure that was provided by Mr. Carl Vaughn, that's generally your typical standard. Our standard is per dwelling. It doesn't matter if it's a 5,000 square foot house. It doesn't matter if it's a little studio apartment. It's 2 per dwelling. And there's no deviation for that. The plan unit development allows the applicant to ask for a deviation, and then you're left to interpret. I have mixed feelings about parking. It's very expensive. It's needed. We live in a very car-centric town, just like Chairman said. We aren't Boise. Maybe someday we'll have other alternative forms of transportation. Maybe we'll have more neighborhood commercial nearby, which makes it walkable. And sometimes it's not bad to park on streets, because we build really big, wide streets and they cost so much money, so why wouldn't we park on them? There's things like that to consider during this. I believe, and it would be my recommendation, as long as each unit, both new and existing, have those proposed 2. Based on, from what I've seen, we haven't had code enforcement complaints in this area. To the best of my knowledge, there hasn't been a complaint which has reached the city about parking in this specific complex, that it should be satisfactory.
Travis?
I should know this, but it's slipping my mind. What's the ADA requirement for the building? 2%?
2% of the number of units, so in this case, it's 1.
Okay, so it's not restriped. I would assume it's got signage all the way through your apartment buildings. Okay. All right.
Commissioner, anything else?
Chairman?
Sir?
In regard to a completely different topic, the Alliance Title building and the home that's next to it that is situated between the parking lot of the Dollar Tree and Alliance Title, if I'm not mistaken, those are partially in a flood zone. Is there anything to be concerned about in terms of the new development, the direction of flow from the retention pond activity area and then through to the East Side Park, which, does this put any of that new development at risk?
Great question. So it is in a flood zone. It's in the AE zone, so we're required to be 1 foot above the elevation established by our building official as being the flood, and so that actually appears in the plans. Oops, let me turn the pointer off. We have not seen, Brian, you would be able to speak more fully about that. I've been to the site, it's probably 40 times, and even after rainfalls, and don't see any collection anywhere, or surface flow or sheet flow off anywhere as well. It's one of the reasons why I mentioned that with the site and with parking, one of the reasons to reduce parking too is that you reduce your stormwater effects. In this case, in order to get our parking, we did not, but I have a seepage bed below, so all the stormwater that falls on the site will stay on the site.
Okay, Commission, entertain a motion.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the rezone of .716 acres located to the east and adjacent to the Lincoln Square Apartments and south of 1695 Legion Boulevard, Lincoln Square Apartments to R4 PUD planned unit development under the following conditions. Subject to site plan amendments and required by building, public works, fire, and zoning and officials to comply with applicable city codes and standards. All future development will comply with the uses of bulk coverage controls provided attachment number 8, proposed planning unit development, and that the new addition, including will require at least 2 parking spots for the additional, is it 44 units? And I'm not sure if we wanted to add the restriping and the parking lot to be restriped to show the additional 2 per unit.
Mr. Chair,
Mm-hmm.
for clarification, it was a very good motion.
Thank you.
It was a very good one, but I think the order of operations is important. I think it's important that it is known by the applicant, none of these new units will receive certificate of occupancy until the restriping is completed. That has to come first,
Yeah, that.
if you want to insert that.
So that the construction will not be completed until such restriping and/or signification of 2 parking spots per unit will be shown first.
First certificate of occupancy.
First certificate of occupancy.
Well, it's been said about 4 times, so it's definitely on record now. Do I have a second? Second by Billy. All right, Scott, I'm starting with you.
Aye.
Christina?
Aye.
Billy?
Aye.
Travis?
Aye.
As well. Motion passes. Thank you. Next item on our list this evening, we have a planned unit development for a rezone of a C3 to an R4 PUD Freedom Estates. It's the applicant of Yosinki Investments LLC. It is a request would allow for a master plan development providing 28 1- and 2-bedroom units consisting of 2 structures. 1 3-story building containing 12 units and 1 2-story building containing 16 units. Amenities including a pavilion, playground, dog park, walking path, and covered bicycle rack. The site is approximately 1.112 acres and is currently addressed as 830 North 2nd East Street and former location of Freedom Lanes Bowling Center. Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Similar to the prior request, this is a property which does not meet the 3-acre threshold for a planned unit development. However, the applicant did come before City Council during a meeting, gave a summary of what they would like to do, and then the City Council has allowed them to submit for a planned unit development. The subject property is currently zoned C3 Commercial. It was most recently home to the Freedom Lanes Bowling Alley, and a planned unit development request has been submitted to transition the property from C3 to R4 for the sake of multifamily development. And with that, I will turn the time over to the applicant's representative, Mr. Taryn Mitchell with TKM Architects.
Actually, Chairman, really quickly before we proceed, I just want to make sure that everybody is aware and to disclose that Mr. Yasinski and I do work for the same brokerage, and I can be biased and do not have any sort of interest in this project.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so let me just clarify. Do you own any of this property?
No.
No. Are you a business partner with this person?
No.
Okay. That's all you know.
Perfect. Okay, Mr. Taryn.
He stays busy.
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, seems like just a few minutes ago we had this great discussion. So I think we'll just dive right in if that's all right. And so again, thank you for allowing us to present. We're really excited about the project. I think we all know the site, the subject site pretty well. And we're excited for, I'm going to say that the next step in its evolution. So before I do so, I'd like you to introduce two very special people. So I'll add a little bit more flavor, I think, to my introduction. And so I think most of you know I'm a family man. I've got 5 kids, and it just pulls on my heartstrings. So their father actually called me and said, "Hey, we heard you're an architect, and you don't know what that really means, but you can draw stuff."
Not an engineer.
That's right.
Not an engineer.
Not an engineer. So, I would say we hit it off pretty well. And Mr. Yasinski couldn't be here, but his 2 sons are here to represent their partnership.
Yeah, no, so I'm Colton Yasinski. Christina, know her well. This is my little brother, Brenton. My father, Leo, I think he's on YouTube if it's on there. But anyways, he couldn't be here for work-related reasons. But yeah, we're excited to invest in the community. I'm a realtor by trade, as we talked about, and came across the project, and we've done family fix and flips before and all of that kind of things, and just wanted to jump into ground-up construction, and we saw the growth and the demand for housing here in Mountain Home, and thought it's a great project site. So we're excited to hopefully have that opportunity to provide some good housing.
Excellent, thank you. So, I think the summaries you provide are excellent, so I'm not going to beat a dead horse. Freedom Estates is on the site, as you know, that is currently the bowling alley, and there's no bowling alley in it anymore, but the building is still there. And we have reached out to a number of the community members that surround, they're immediately adjacent. Those of you that know me know that I talk a lot and talk to people in stores. I like to get to know people. And there's a nostalgia, I would say, for the bowling alley. And so I asked them, is it the bowling alley? Is it the building? Is it the site? What is it? And they mentioned it's really the memories that they have with the families. And we're hoping to capture some of that, to borrow some of that on a site that just couldn't survive as a bowling alley. It's due in part because of location. Similar to what I mentioned in the last one, it's not its location in town that's the problem. It's its location in that particular area where it's hidden. You can't see it. And there are small narrow streets that we'll discuss in a moment that are private drives that the residents don't want traffic coming in and out of. And so we're proposing to avoid that. And one of the best ways to do that is to have residences and to utilize the site to its greatest capacity. So what is proposed are two buildings in two phases. Phase one is a 3-story, 12-unit garden-style apartment, which would be a walk-up. And so there's a staircase tucked in between the two units. This particular investment community has 1- and 2-bedroom apartments, and they're split 50-50. So 50 are 1-bedroom, 50 are 2-bedroom. They do have laundry hookups. We had some good discussions. Well, I won't say we. Our client here has had a number of discussions with the laundromat, and some of those discussions is why this has taken the shape that it has. So I won't talk about the one on the right, the graphic on the right. The one on the left is one that I mentioned kind of far and wide. So I have a few siblings that live in Denver. I'm getting old, so Denver, when I was growing up, was really a great place to be. Still is a great place. It's grown really fast, and it's grown a lot. And one of the reasons why Denver now has a bad reputation in planning circles, I'm probably a decade older, I think, than Brock, so when I had my planning classes, Denver was the case study on how not to design a city. It was like the worst case scenario is Denver. And its explosive growth and everything has not affected its affordability as much as our nearest neighbor. So this chart here tells you that Boise, as of, I believe the story came out in 2021, in September of 2021, Boise is the least affordable city in the United States and the second least affordable city in North America. Not a label we want. And I've already given you reasons that I believe for that. And this particular development as well seeks to help improve Boise in our area so that it's not labeled the least affordable place. Okay, so we'll get into this particular drawing, a little harder to read than the other ones, but our main drives here are East 8th North Street, and then a public drive, which only extends to the edge of our property line. And that is the reason for, I guess, what could be considered a little bit different configuration. We have a loop, as our fire marshal really likes to see, that you don't need to back up. You can just come in and come out. There are 26-foot drive lanes. We've got a 28-foot turning radius in our corners, and so there's plenty of access and plenty of space for the drive lanes. We are proposing a 1.5 parking stalls per unit for this investment community. And the reason for it is, it's why I wouldn't normally talk about Boise. I don't think any of us want us to be like Boise, but there's that pull towards it to be like that. And so the parking is a difficult one to tackle. I think that because we are parked less than the desirable 2 to 1, is that we do have public streets that in normal circumstances in neighborhoods are used for, we'll call them overflow parking or guest parking. And so it is not our intention to count them, which we are not, as part of our total. But we would like to have that be a consideration, that there is room as an overflow when necessity arises. Okay, we'll go through our current conditions at the moment. Most of our residents here will recognize this, so I like to spot for potential projects, where is our water and our sewer coming from? So you often see, this is not a storm drain, that's a sanitary sewer drain. So you see me stand by those. I've been involved in the project for quite some time, so this was December 23rd when I took this picture. I think it was a day or 2 after a snowstorm. I would like to make mention, almost the entire site is covered in concrete and asphalt. And that lends itself to a problem that you will see. You can see more. There's our neighbor, our friendly neighbor in the laundromat. Okay, so right here, this was about 4 or 5 inches deep after the snowfall, as the snow started to melt. And there's no place for that water to go. It sheds off into the street, and it collects right there. So one of the problems with not having a storm sewer system, let's say, is that with seepage beds they get filled with debris. So over time, they get filled up with sand and other matter, and they don't function quite like they were intended. So this would be mitigated through what we're proposing. We also have an interesting fire hydrant. It is located kind of in the private drive. We were hoping to gain access and to move that, but the negotiations didn't quite work out, and because it's not our property, we wanted to move it, pick it up and move it in, but it's not on our property, and so we couldn't work through the negotiations. This is behind it, or excuse me, to the side of it, and this is behind it, where there is utilities with Idaho Power. And again, you can see underutilized land here. Okay, and this is taken from next to the laundry. Okay, and so this is what we're proposing in order to meet the needs of the community. So we've got our private drive. I like the native grass and vegetation, so this is deer grass. This one is fescue drive, and this is coneflower, so those are native plants here. And so it's still difficult, I think, to read. One of these days, Brock, I'll send you a picture that doesn't have the words that are so small you can't read them. So again, our loop, we would like to subdivide the lot into 2 to correspond to the 2 phases under which we would like to construct and develop. And so this is a 3-story 12-unit. This is a 2-story 16-unit for a total of 28. And while the first phase is under construction, this building will be left alone. We're not going to demo it first. Okay. I would love a chance to talk to you all for an hour about landscaping, but I'll save you. And there is buffalo grass on this one, so we have I skipped it past it already. Anyway, we're proposing several amenities, so a community pavilion, a children's playground. We will have bike racks as well. Even though this is not a bicycle community, I do see a fair number of bicyclists. And with gas prices increasing like they are, I don't know how much longer anyone will be able to drive trucks or anything. We do have a dog park that is fenced, and so I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Colton, I think the intention is that there be, I call them pocket dogs, but they're smaller dogs, not the large dogs. We have some great dog parks in town that accommodate larger animals, and so this would be for the tenants and would be a smaller dog park. Okay, this would be a view on on Fescue, looking towards the 2-story 16-unit. Now, I will talk a little bit about the architecture. The intention is that we don't have a 3-story building next to the existing townhouses and the more residential side. The 3-story building has been deliberately pushed closer to the street, to the public, where we have a street, so we're not blocking the sunlight and looming over somebody else's property. And but to make good use of this particular portion of the site. And a 2-story lends itself to the adjacent properties. And so this would be a view looking really to the east, so due east. These are the floor plans, and again, it's a 50-50 mix between 1 and 2 bedrooms. The first floor the first and second floor. This would be the third floor of building 1. This would be building 2, the first floor, and the second floor of building 2. This would be located on North 2nd East as you are going to enter into the complex off the public street. This is a little further back, closer to East 8th North. Okay. And you two have anything you'd like to add?
I think that's about it. Yeah.
Okay, I'll have you guys step back and we'll open up public hearing. Sure.
Just so we don't forget, we did receive a piece of correspondence from a individual, Kyle Strange. He owns property within the area at 155 Sagebrush Avenue in opposition to the project. That correspondence has been placed in all of your packets. Mr. Strange's major concerns were the area being congested with the proposed density, the opportunity for a increase in crime, and also that the potential demolishing of the bowling alley takes away for future potential recreational activities for the town. So I just want to make sure that that gets stated and that's on the record.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. With that, I'll go ahead and open up public hearing. Anybody want to come up? Come on up. Again, just need your full name and address, please.
Talon Mullenix. This is my wife Heather Mullenix. We live at 110 East 8th North, Mountain Home. We have a slight laundry list of concerns. I think first noted concern is going to be that we have a 25 by 35 foot shop
Our shop faces that
faces
parking
into
lot.
that bowling alley parking lot. I'm concerned about losing access to that. If this is to go through, I would ask for a deeded lot line adjustment to get rear access for vehicles, because that's gonna landlock my shop. I'm not gonna get any vehicles into my man door. I have a camp trailer that we park back there. We have lots of vehicles that we get in and out through there. That shop has been there for probably 20, 25 years. I'm not sure exactly. It's been there for a long time. Another concern.
We're new, sorry.
First one.
First timer.
Was also, let's see here, privacy is a huge concern of mine. With having people in and out down that driveway all day and all night, right on our back fence line. If there's not a fence there, it poses issues of people possibly walking into my backyard, messing with any of my stuff that I have sitting outside right there. Noise, cars in and out all night, all day. I guess the benefit of having the business there was they had business hours. So after 10, 11 o'clock at night, there was no traffic back there whatsoever. Also, having a 3-story building popped up right behind our property. Everybody from second and third story is going to be looking right down into my backyard, my neighbor's backyard, and everybody across the way from them. Parking is also a huge concern. Without it being 2 per unit, it looks like it's going to be congested back there, and you're going to have the potential of people parking along the back fence line, which if I do have access there, that's going to hinder me from getting access. So then I'm going to have to deal with possibly calling tow trucks or dealing with somebody else to have to get cars removed from in front of our line.
Conflict. We want to avoid that if possible. I did personally have a little bit of a concern with the dog park. We do have 2 dogs ourselves, so we are dog lovers, but we don't necessarily want to hear them barking all of the time. I did hear that he mentioned that it would be a small dog park, but we do have a concern about friends, family, anybody who comes to visit that says, you have a dog park, can I bring my big dogs over? How will that be regulated?
Other members of the community.
Surrounding areas, we're just kind of concerned about how that's going to be monitored and regulated.
Including parking, because
And-
that's going to get, we got people coming in for the dog park that aren't from the complex. It's going to congest the area even more.
And we do have the nearby dog park, yes, but I think that it will become more of a convenience thing for people that know that the dog
They
park
can
is
just
there.
walk there from the neighborhood
Exactly.
close by.
And this is kind of just personal opinion that little dogs are a little bit more yippy. We have a 12-pound dog, so we know firsthand how loud they can be.
And then there's crime rate. I would be a little concerned with the parking lot being open in the middle of the night. With businesses back there, you can see all the traffic that's coming in and out. You don't really have to question what's happening back there. If there's traffic in and out all night for apartments, it could potentially bring more crime to the area. And wintertime snow removal, where's all the snow gonna go? You start putting buildings in there. I know the bowling alley was pushing it all up against the fence lines, but if they're gonna landscape and they're gonna put buildings in there, there's gotta be a place for all that snow to go when we get, large snow amounts.
I think that was it. On this part. Yes.
Yep.
Awesome. Thank you, guys.
I signed both of our names on here.
Yes, sir.
Is both of our names on the line okay? Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Public hearing, hold on. Anybody else?
Ryan Morgan, this is my wife Sydney. We live at 108 East 8th North. I think our main concern was also privacy from the 3-story building, them seeing right through our backyard into our backyard. We don't have a shop or anything from that back easement, but what we do have is we have parking on the side of our house that we use potentially as a driveway, We don't have a garage or a shop, but that's where we park our vehicles. The plan showed a sidewalk going right there, so we would lose that parking right there because we can't park on a sidewalk. So we're just kind of concerned about that. We would have no other parking. Request possible access to a gate in our backyard so we could park there. Kind of similar to Talon's, I guess. Otherwise, it's on-street parking, and that right there, that's a really thin road. People fly through there. And so we would just kind of really like to avoid that if possible. So mainly, and it's the security issues. It's the same thing that it's the same concerns everybody else has. Crime rate, security. We have property in the backyard. We have our own possessions. We have sheds and stuff back there. So we just kind of want to make sure everything's secure and comfortable for everybody to look into. That's about it.
Anything else?
No.
All right, thank you. You want to go ahead and come up, sir? Yep.
Good evening, Tom Roski, 570 East, 17 North. I'm a business owner in that complex, really. We've been in that complex since 1998. We own a daycare in that facility. My concerns, or our concerns, are where, let's see, Rattlesnake Road, the Rattlesnake Avenue that used to go straight up to the bowling alley, and then it goes to Tumbleweed, then it comes back around to Sagebrush, which makes the big loop around the whole complex where all of our townhouses and our businesses are at, is with the apartments going in, are they going to be utilizing strictly 2nd Avenue or 2nd Street right there going out to 8th, or are they going to be going through our complex and our businesses? I mean, you come out any of those exits right there on either Sagebrush or Rattlesnake, you're going to be, it's a nightmare trying to get out during not even peak hours. You have people coming and going early in the morning if it's military, which I'm retired military, I get it. We have weird hours as it is, and I know we are desperate for housing in this town, but we need to look at a lot of these different things. Also, during construction, they pointed out the one fire hydrant that was sitting there. To the best of my knowledge, we only have 2 fire hydrants right now in that complex. One is up by my business, and one is by the fire, or where the bowling alley sits at. If we turn water off during construction to that fire hydrant, what are we going to be utilizing if anything happens in that complex for all the other townhouses, the fourplexes that are behind us, down on Sagebrush, I believe it is, or off of Tumbleweed coming around. The other aspect is we also have a playground in our daycare. It is fenced in, but we have, over the past years, people jumping our fence, getting into our play equipment and things like that. If somebody gets hurt because they jumped our complex or into our fence and everything like that and gets hurt on our property, I'm still liable. So I'd have a very difficult time with children coming over from that complex into our playground going, oh, it's another playground, we can play there. And then something happens, I don't want to come back and end up getting sued by them because of that. So there's a lot of things that we're looking at. And if the amount of people that are going to be living there, just the traffic going through, depending on which way they're going, if they're going by our complex, I mean, we have numerous employees, which is fine, but still we have people dropping off, picking up all times of the day between 6 a.m. and 5:30 at night. And if it comes down to it, our parking lot is always empty at nighttime. Who's to say that they're not going to go over and use my parking lot that I had to put in at my own cost, that I have to upkeep, that's asphalt, which is not cheap. So if they start parking in my parking lot and start leaving their vehicles there, I will tow their vehicles, and it's going to be at their expense. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Anybody else? Go ahead, Misty.
Commissioners, Misty Pierce again. So, the two new commissioners, Ms. Drake and Mr. Harjo, I want to make sure I say that right, were at the last special meeting for the city council that had to do the planning and zoning meeting because you guys weren't a full group. They required, and I think you guys might remember this, 2 parking spaces per 2-bedroom and 1.5 per 1-bedroom for the accommodation of a vehicle and possibly a motorcycle. So they were requiring that off of the 2, I believe it was 2 different apartment complexes that were approved last week. So I just wanted to point that out, that the parking looks a little tight. It looks like it's not enough there. You guys have been asking for more parking in other ones, and I just want to let you know that City Council is hammering people for that as well. So, thank you.
Thanks, Misty. Anybody else?
Hi, Richard Smith, 110 Rattlesnake. My concerns somewhat echo what Tom was just saying. The difference is I own the building on 110 Rattlesnake right there. That is I actually pay for that parking lot, that road, and then the one right next used to be the schoolhouse. It's been repainted to match mine, so they both look the same. That's also an office building. There's 3 businesses in my building, doctor's office, insurance, and what does she do? Acupuncture. And then there's the building next to me is also an office. Those roads are actually private. They belong to they actually, I pay taxes on them, but the HOA, our HOA has to take care of those. The city doesn't take care of those. So the fact that with driving, with 32 more units, parking is also an issue where they, use their overflow, because if you look at the maps, 2nd Street is not very large. They're going to end up parking out on 8th Street or in our parking lots. The big concern is an extra amount of vehicles driving on those roads. Rattlesnake, sagebrush, and tumbleweed. The bowling alley and the laundromat used to belong to the HOA. I don't know when they were able to pull out. I don't know how they got to pull out. But with the bowling alley closing down and there hasn't been a whole lot of traffic there. One of our biggest concerns with the HOA is having to pay for that road to be managed and taken care of. The extra traffic. If you look at the parking lot there on Rattlesnake, we park on both sides. That road going down the middle, it can't have a lot more traffic through there. It really can't. Really poses a safety concern there. So those are my main concerns there.
Okay. Thank you, Richard. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
Can I redress this?
Sorry. Well, actually, yes. Go ahead.
See if there's that's fine.
One thing that I thought of, when they start doing demolition, construction, which way are the vehicles, their construction vehicles, going to be going out? Is it going to be strictly on 2nd Street, or is it going to be, again, coming down Rattlesnake and Tumbleweed and Sagebrush? Because we start bringing down, dump trucks and everything else, it's going to tear up the roads that we have to maintain ourselves. So, sorry.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Would anybody else like to redress?
Hello.
Hi.
My name is Kim Sykes, and I live at 2320 North 6th East in Mountain Home. I am the HOA president for Trellis Square, so I've had the opportunity to talk to numerous people who are owners there, people who rent there, and they're just concerned about mainly the traffic, I would say. The roads are pretty windy around that way, especially if you're going to go through there to maybe scoot out to Boise. If you're, depending on which way you go, you can get out 2 different ways, but One side affects the businesses, the other one, goes through all the residential area. So there's a lot of concern about that. Also, we have a lot of problems currently with people dumping garbage there in our dumpsters, like furniture, and that's currently a problem, just random people coming through there. And so we have issues with that all the time, and they're concerned that that might even increase with more people coming in and living there. So not necessarily opposed to having neighbors there or having the development itself, just maybe more concerned with the road. But on a side note, the HOA does own a strip of land across the back of the property. It's a berm that is, we don't use, actually. We have this piece of ground, and I don't know if there's any kind of possible way that could be utilized in some way to, I don't know if there's another way out or another way in that could come off of Third. I really have no idea, but we do have this extra piece of land that's just in the back. That's wide, and the road could be widened, but again, it's not city maintained, and the HOA just doesn't have the money to do something like that. So anyway, that's our concern.
Thanks, Kim. Anybody else? Readdress?
Before you go, this is the sheriff you're referring to. Thank you.
Along with Kim, with the HOA, I'm also curious if there's a way to possibly have them do a lot line adjustment, widen the roads, because we've discussed this in the HOA, trying to widen them to where we can get the city to take over. That would be a definite possible compromise with the HOA, to have them be able to do a lot line adjustment, bring the roads of rattlesnake, sagebrush, and tumbleweed up to city requirements, and so the HOA no longer has that. Then you're able to have that traffic in there, and the HOA doesn't have to take care of that. That'd be a great compromise for us too. For that to happen.
Thank you. Going once. All right, seeing no more, go ahead and close the public hearing. Everybody, thank you so much for your comments and questions and concerns. Appreciate that. Mr. Cherry?
Yeah.
Huh?
So the applicant now has an opportunity to address the public.
Cherry, come on up.
So.
Where do you want to start?
It's entirely up to you. I'll flip back to the site plan.
So the biggest one that I'm having a hard time with is private drive and going in with a development and saying, well, we're not going to use that drive. Well, we know that everybody's going to use that drive because a road is a road. How are we going to ensure that we are not using private drives, that HOAs are going to that have to keep those roads up and ensure that your traffic stays on Second?
Excellent question. So I think we do appreciate the comments and the concerns. I think we can address all of them. To your question, are those private drives currently monitored? So in other words, does the HOA, do the community members, do they stop people from driving there right now? Do they stop people that were using the bowling alley that were then exiting out to Highway 30? Did they file complaints about that in the past? And I didn't get the hard numbers from Mr. Morgan, but I'm under the impression that there were bowling tournaments that had pretty sizable turnouts, to the point where the parking lot itself was filled. And so we have a case study in the past of a use that was more intensive at peak hours than what we're proposing. So similar to Lincoln Square, I think the intention all along, we knew this would come up, and we are very sympathetic. We do not want the future tenants. I mean, these are residents. These are people that need homes just like everybody else. And We do not want them to abuse those who came before. We don't want them coming down here or down Rattlesnake. And so we do have a natural bottleneck in that we have a fire hydrant in the middle of the road, and we have properties that don't belong, that aren't public, and aren't part of the discussion. So we would like, and we propose to include in the lease agreements, again, that traffic is not to take those roadways as part of the lease agreement, that if people, residents here, are parking over here, they could be towed at their expense. Absolutely. And so, as part of the property management, Colton, I think you can speak to that, but would it not be, would this particular apartment complex itself would monitor its residents, and if found to park in places like the laundromat, for instance. Over here, I'll address that in a second, but certainly over here on East 8th North, or down East 8th North as it connects to US 30, and definitely over here, given that these are private, it's privately owned land. We're Americans. We believe in private property and the importance and the sanctity of private property. So there would be monitoring, and either when notified or when discovered, if there are residents parking in those locations, they would be towed at the offender's expense.
Okay, who will be doing the monitoring?
Property management.
Property management. So on site, I think?
On site, yep.
Okay. Parking is the next big issue.
Yeah,
Travis?
that's the elephant here. A lot of these issues that these folks had mentioned is going to be contributing to this 1.5 ratio here. So it's human nature to take the path of least resistance. You're never going to be able to curb that. You can police it all you want, but the factual point is that they're still going to do it. I think I voiced that in the previous, that 1.5 just doesn't seem to work for me. I just don't understand how it would be possible to be able to limit someone to one vehicle per spot without seeing some sort of overflow. And I can sympathize with some of the folks that they said parking on the street. I was an avid bowler. I did it, men's league and Friday night 9-pin. I would agree that some of the turnouts were quite large, but they were also in spurts. So now you're talking about consistent traffic versus spurted traffic, if you will, or temporary. I'm trying to understand the 3-story as well as far as the privacy. I think I know for me being a homeowner, and I've been a homeowner here for about 12 years, I think I'd have a huge problem with that. I think I'd have a difficulty someone watching my backyard or my kids, or, that kind of invasion really doesn't feel good, especially when you have no choice. You can't say, you don't use your rear blinds, or do you plan on cutting, there's no windows in the back. Let's say that you'd remove all the windows from the back. I'm not sure if that would appease the situation, but it would definitely mediate it. I'm not sure if that's something we would think about or not. Those are just some of my concerns. Not to sum up the entirety of everybody's concerns. Those are some main ones that I heard that were pretty concerning to me.
I know this has nothing to do with this commission, but are you dead set on that 3-story? By knocking it down to a 2-story, not only do you start talking about relieving some of that parking issue, but now you're also relieving some of the privacy issue. Again, that's not for this commission to say, but throwing it out there for you to have a discussion with the community surrounding. And out of curiosity, have you gone out to the community and had conversations with people in that area?
Yeah, we've had conversations with a few people. I think we even have letters of support from a few businesses, etc. So
I think we have 4 or 5, maybe 6 letters of support from surrounding neighbors.
Surrounding businesses.
And so...
Where?
They're in...
So the bed and breakfast, we have...
Salon.
Yeah. The laundromat, salon. Where's the neighbor? Which neighbor did your dad send me?
Sorry, I'm only questioning because I haven't seen them in my packet. That's why I'm asking.
Yeah, they were, that's probably more they trickled in as opposed to came in a lump sum. So I was adding files to the upload on the internet.
Chairman?
Yes, sir.
Again, so we've talked about this before, the height of buildings, and we've gone over this, you and I especially, but there's still that looming issue of the privacy. Is that something that are we going to, you know what I'm saying? Can we address it straight on? Or-
Yeah, I think we can address that pretty easily, actually. So, so this is a 26-foot drive, these are 20-foot, and I have 10 feet here. So we're looking at 50, 60 feet before we even hit a fence line. We'll have a 7-foot, I can't remember if it's 6 or 7-foot privacy fence there as well. I'll address, if it's all right, as part of some of the concerns that were brought up, I'll address them too. A very easy way to address concerns of privacy, if that is one that will really make so the project doesn't move forward, we can simply eliminate, I can't remember if I even put windows. I think I usually put windows on the ends for units, and we can eliminate windows. So in other words, now you don't have a mechanisms to see into backyards there. Usually people want the windows, but if privacy is a concern, it's certainly something we can do.
So one of the concerns that were brought up was by Mr. Talon about there's a privacy driveway. Nope, sorry, 25 by 30 foot shop.
Mr.
Yes.
Chairman. Okay. So I reviewed the property ownership boundary lines. This matter is purely a matter between the owner of the shop and the owner of the adjoining property. It's not a matter for the city to weigh in on in any form.
Okay.
So there could be claims on the part of the person who owns the property that has been using that other piece of private property. In other words, there's no part of that person's access to the property concerning the shop that is on a city street. So the city's not involved in that.
Okay. Now, just to make sure, Mr. Talon, do you understand what was just stated?
I do.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think.
Go ahead.
So
I don't want to step over my bounds. You stop me if I'm going.
I want you and I want the owner of the property and the owner of the shed to take that conversation privately.
Perfect.
Yep.
And it's not before this body.
Yep.
So.
Okay.
Definitely done.
So if I may, just quickly, we're cognizant of the current usage of the adjoining properties. And so I think we can come to an accord.
Definitely.
I remember being chairman for the first year, and one of the things that came up, and I believe you were the one that came up with it, was the least amount of political or governmental control, the better. And I totally agree with that, because I believe that you need to have those conversations with the people that are surrounding your property. Because happy neighbors are best neighbors.
Definitely.
And the only way you get that is by having those conversations and making sure that you're meeting everybody's needs.
Yep.
Understanding that I don't think anybody in this room is saying they don't want, residential, they don't want to bring in that, what their concerns are is for what they've been there, and how what you're going to do might affect their everyday life. Only way that's going to be mitigated is through having those conversations and making sure that when you go to the drawing table that you're listening to each one of those people and saying, how can we best make everybody have a win-win here?
Yep.
So that's my 2 cents, because again, less government the better. Let you have those conversations. I don't want to have to dictate, all that kind of stuff.
Mr. Chair, would that be the same thing that citizen concerned about the sidewalk, that they would lose some parking?
No, that's a different, so to distinguish the two.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And my client is the city, the corporation of the city of Mountain Home, so I have to make sure we don't get dragged into civil fights that aren't ours to fight, or to vigorously assert those that are ours to fight. And so, I have the Elmer County parcel map that maybe I can just go point out.
I can pull it up.
Well, now you're... So Second Street does adjoin the property that the Morgans lived in. And that is a city street that is platted to a certain width, which I don't know. I don't know if there's pins on the ground. There's a significant departure between what we can see on maps and what we see on the ground more often than not. And so this is where the city is involved. So this is a city street, and the city has a requirement for development that will probably come into play, this one and the other one, of sidewalk, curb, and gutter. And so there'll have to be, probably, I don't know how that will look, but sidewalk and curb and gutter put in there. Whether that eliminates city streets are the exclusive control of the city, whether parking's allowed at all on streets or not. It's not a right that anyone has. So that concern can be addressed. That is a concern that can be addressed. The other one is purely a private matter. And I don't recall whether the concern was they wanted or didn't want a sidewalk, but I think it's correct to say that a sidewalk and curb and gutter would ultimately have to be put in there.
And Taryn, what I'm seeing from what you have in your map here is you have 5-foot concrete public sidewalk along that north second east street.
As part of our early discussions, it was stated to us that it would be preferable, well, not even preferable, they would want, and I hate to use the word mandate, so they really find it desirable to have curb and gutter, to have a continuous public way built it throughout. And this is the first I've heard of any concern. Ultimately, the city will decide what they would like to do. I think we're open to build it or don't build it. I mean, the cost is really, this is not a huge cost for us, and which is why we said, okay, win-win. But we want to have good neighbors, and we want to have a good relationship with those that with whom we're going to be dealing every day.
Okay. Commission?
Snow removal. Mr. Chairman, what would be a snow removal abatement plan?
Another great question. So I had this conversation with Mr. Lee.
He left
Okay. Right before the meeting. So one of the, I would say, main benefits of this particular proposal is that we are lessening the amount of pavement, meaning that we're going to have less snow removal. Now, we still have snow removal. So on the site plan, Brock, would you mind pulling up the site? So it's proposed that we use this space, this thin strip over here, and that we use the front for snow removal. And there's a possibility of using this. We cannot bury, obviously, the fire hydrant, which was another concern. So we have an additional fire hydrant that we are putting in at our cost here in the corner. But we believe that we have sufficient area in order to remove the snow that we will have.
Mr. Chair. This is where I wish that our Public Works Director was here. I would have to ask the surrounding property owners, but I don't even know if the city plows north, second, east, that strip. I think that's against our
According to Lee,
policy.
said no.
I don't, it probably would be nice. But I know that our snow removal abilities are extremely limited. So I don't believe the city plows that one section of public right-of-way as is.
Do you think that might change if this development happens? I mean, it is a city street.
It is a city street, but from what I understand about plowing, which is extremely limited, it's mainly arterials, collector roadways. And they don't do neighborhoods. And I think anyone who is a longtime Mountain Home resident has survived a few blizzards. And I think it's hard to say whether or not that they would plow that going into that, especially since it's abutting next to a private roadway, because then we would be pushing snow off our public right of way to the HOA.
We actually do rattlesnakes, sagebrush, and tumbleweed. The HOA pays for that to be removed.
Awesome. So, just certain items to consider. Very good information to have.
Chairman.
Yes, sir.
The fact that the HOA does remove that snow is going to kind of add to my point of the path of least resistance here. So I guess my point is it'd probably be in your best interest to maybe have a plan in something in a way, because someone will for sure take a plowed road over a non-plowed road. So just a comment.
Great point, I think. So we haven't discussed it at length, but I did include snow pictures for reference. I think to Brock's point, I'm not sure how the city would deal with it. I know that for snow plows, they don't want to back up. And they're not going to want to plow a private drive to loop around, so really it becomes a dead end, unless they just pick the blade up and then drive through the HOA. But I think as part of our plan, we're counting on plowing. Snow removal, excuse me.
Billy?
Mr. Chair, there was one that was brought up by citizens about the private drive that they can get, I'm not sure the legal word for it, PIN, where it could be turned into a city street.
Or lot line?
Or lot line.
Again, not speaking as the Public Works Director, but I believe it's a larger conversation, taking over Tumbleweed Avenue, taking over Rattlesnake Lane. Not that it's in the realm of impossibility, but there are a lot of private roadways that the city doesn't have capacity
necessarily to take over.
Right.
And what's difficult, and if I can, Mr. Chair, as far as the discussion with the HOA, you could be pondering, well, maybe we condition their approval upon them joining the HOA. That's really difficult from a land use decision sort of standpoint, because it's the enforceability of it. I don't think we can bind someone to that as far as a condition, even though on the surface it kind of makes sense and that it could potentially solve everything. I don't know if that's a legal avenue. And I saw Mr. Schroeder also.
I don't know about making them join the HOA, but I think some input from the Streets Department or the Public Works Director as to the fate of the privately owned streets that butt right into the city street. I don't know the answer to that, and I think that's relevant. Because there are people who own those private streets, who are private property owners, who have expressed a concern that people who are not part of the HOA will be using those streets. There was testimony that was provided, however, that it's commonly been used to access the bowling alley, but maybe other people did or didn't. Now we're in this, which was the look I had earlier, prescriptive use.
And this is my question for legal.
I don't know.
So is this a private roadway with a public access easement? Do we know that?
If you pull the county assessor site back up, you can see where the rattlesnake, all of that is actually part of our parcel.
Yeah.
And part of what you're concerned with, the bowling alley and the laundromat were actually part of the HOA. Up until not too long ago, about the time they quit doing that. Now, not that I don't want that part of the HOA This HOA is a nightmare as it is. Businesses and residential, it's an absolute nightmare as it is, so. But you can see where this is actual, so this would be mine, this is part of the actual property, the entire property. So, I'm sorry, I just wanted to help answer the questions.
Travis?
Yeah, I have another one. So I'm going to beat this dead horse again. So I don't need to know. I've gotten legal counsel to do that for me before, but I don't need to know how you would create 2 spaces per lot, but would it be an applicable thing?
Ooh, that's a tough one. So, anything is possible. So, it comes down to cost. And, I married an accountant, and I joke around with her especially, and I just said, accountants rule the world. If there isn't money, things don't get done. So with this particular, I don't know about the pro forma. I try not to know about it early on until we go into construction documents. But cutting out 4 units, given the cost of land and then the cost of construction and everything else, I mean, it's tough to get financing right now anyway, because the interest rates are going up, and they will be going up more in order to curb inflation. So cutting 4 units out, which I think would bring us pretty close to our target, what we need in terms of parking, is something that probably would need additional research, some number crunching.
If I can, I'm not saying this is going to be a solve all. That's not what I'm pointing at. I'm pointing at that it would alleviate some concerns as far as being 2, and even if you do bring 1 car per unit, we'll say I own a studio apartment and I only have 1 vehicle. The fact that I have 2 opens the point for somebody else to have 2 vehicles for their 2-bedroom, and I understand that you allotted that amount for the 2-bedroom. I get that, but that's not always the way things work. We all know that. So.
Well, I do know that, and so in lease agreements they serve the functions of CC&Rs and HOA restrictions.
Mm-hmm.
And so the lease agreement can state that for a 1-bedroom, you're allotted 1 car. That was kind of what we were looking into, and that can be enforceable.
We are within the realm of doing. That doesn't sound like something we could add as a condition, does it?
Can I jump in on this one real quick? Yeah, you can have that lease agreement, but what happens when all of a sudden you're on city street? That one person is having their car parked at that parking spot, but when they have 2 cars roll up, where's that second car going to pop?
It's true, and
some of it does have to do with company, not to cut in between. It's not all of it like he's scoping. Not all of it has to do with ownership. Some of it has to do with guests, mom, dad, brother, sister.
Absolutely.
Things like that.
We're cognizant of that. Again, every metropolitan area, every city, every town in America deals with that very thing. And you probably know where my opinions lie, given that I'm rather libertarian, and so there's only so much enforcement. I mean, you can't make a perfect society. You can't force people to live like you would have them live. We know there's need. We know that these will fill up. We know that there are certain measures and precautions we can take to help guide or manage the use, meaning that there are assigned parking stalls for the units. Those are all things that are fairly easily enforceable. I don't know if, I wanted to say this is months and months ago. There were lots of ifs. What if this happened? What if that happened? We're going to be here for 20 years if we try to solve all of those what ifs. We know that there are markets close by that have reduced parking ratios. They seem to work. That doesn't mean that we won't have struggles if we're approved or passed along to city council. I do know, I watched the meeting with city council about the mandate to have 2 units. We think that we can make it work given the ratio. It's a 50-50 split based, and then we have a lease agreement that says if you have a 1-bedroom, you get one stall. And that's what we're hoping to accomplish.
Chairman? I have another question. It's not necessarily off topic. He had mentioned construction and routing. I'm assuming that obviously can be alleviated through the company, hey, this is the only road you use. I guess I'm more concerned with the asbestos removal from the building. Does that have asbestos construction in it at all?
I believe that there is no asbestos. So the hazardous materials inspection, I believe, was conducted. Portions of the bowling alley existing, like the things that were really desirable, like the wood lanes, and things have already been
Tested and everything.
Yep. So, and remediated. What I say remediated, I don't think they found anything, not even lead paint.
Mr. Chair, if, again, I'm just looking at compromise, if those streets that's a private drive became city streets, that would...
It's big.
Okay, I didn't, because I'm with Travis, is how are you going to alleviate that? That's my biggest concern, are people using, they're going to take the least restricted route, and they will find parking spots somewhere else, and there's going to be conflict potentially because of that. Then if the city says there's two parking spots per dwelling, do we open this up for precedents for future developments? Precedents, I said that wrong.
Precedents.
Like which one, Lincoln or Washington?
Yeah, I'm not studying that. That's your job.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir.
Every now and again, you guys get a tough one, and that's okay. What I'm going to direct you to is the staff report. We have standards for a rezone. They're all there. They're all listed. We have standards for a plan unit development. They're all there. We're having someone asking to deviate from current standards because the applicant believes it will bring the city more value if they were to follow our standards at face value. That's for you to determine. Another important thing to remember is you are a recommending body, and your recommendations should be made off of the zoning ordinance and the comprehensive plan and planning best practices. So it's certain recommendations could say we don't believe the applicant should be able to park it as proposed. We don't believe it should be certain heights. We don't believe there should be windows necessarily. There's that entire plethora of options. So no, because the applicant is asking to deviate from those, you can modify those requests. That falls under your discretion as far as a recommendation. So I would just urge you to look at those. In staff's opinion, I think the biggest thing is parking and height.
That's pretty much what I was about ready to say, is that I'm having a hard time with the 40 and the 30, and you cut the 40 down to 30, and there goes your parking problem too. So that's my issue, and I know that 3-story is kind of for the PUD. Everything around there's nothing 3-story around that area anyway. It's only a 2-story in that area. So personally for me, it's one of those things where I look at it and go, that 40-foot request for height, I mean, if you take that out, you also are dealing with the parking problem that we're also we're hearing as well. So for me, I would probably say, based on that, if you came back and said, okay, not 40 feet, sticking with 30, I think that alleviates a lot of the issues.
Mr. Chair. So, yeah, just to kind of piggyback on what you said, part of the community design of the comprehensive plan says new house and infield, in addition to this in-house house or residential structure, should be harmonious with existing adjoining structures in neighborhoods. Kind of paraphrasing it, but that's the only 3-story that would be in that whole lot of land.
I would note that it's, Mr. Chair, sorry, I don't mean to just jump in. It is currently zoned C3. C3 allows for a 45-foot building, so we would still be under what's currently allowed.
You're asking for an R4 though?
Correct. It's currently zoned C3 though. So if we were to revise it, and use a C3 PUD, we could go up to 45 feet. We chose an R4 for specific reasons. It does have some healthy setbacks to pull us away from property lines. We've got a 2-story building that is closer again to residential area, and we have a bed and breakfast that's 2 stories and a beautiful building that's right there. We have lots of mature trees that we want to keep and maintain, and really want to beautify the area rather than having just an asphalt or concrete parking lot. So we feel very strongly, I feel very strongly it's harmonious with the surrounding neighborhood.
Mr. Chair.
Sir?
Just a point of clarification. The applicant is correct that in the C3, 45 feet is the max height. However, for residential uses, it does instruct you to use the R4, which has a height limit of 30.
Commission, do we have anything else we want to discuss, comments? We want to entertain a motion? I can't make the motion.
I know.
Is it better to make a motion to hold it till we get further information?
What further information do you need? It's either you're denying or approving a PUD. And based on what we have discussed, based on what we've heard, and based on the comprehensive plan.
I'd like to make a motion, Chairman.
Okay.
I'd like to make a motion to deny the request to rezone 1.11 acres located at 830 North 2nd East for C3 General Commercial to Freedom Estates R4 PUD Planned Unit Development.
Second.
Okay, so first by Travis, second by Billy. All right. Billy?
Aye.
Okay, good. You sure?
Yeah.
Okay. Travis?
Aye.
Okay. Sorry, guys. Christina?
Aye.
Scott?
Well, it's a difficult one. I think there are some proposed changes that the applicants can consider amongst themselves. At this moment, I will say aye.
Okay. And it's aye for me as well. Planned unit development has been denied. What this means is then for the next item of the preliminary plat, we do not have to discuss as the first has been denied. So, gentlemen, thank you for your time. We are going to go back to our conditional use permit for the drive-through. We're not done yet. Come on now. We have to go back. She has been so patient, and she has been waiting this entire time.
You're not done yet.
Oh, okay. All right. If you wouldn't mind coming back up, we're going to go back to our conditional use permit for the proposed drive-through car wash located at the City View Drive.
Go solve this a long time ago. Spoke with the owners, the main developer, and trailers cannot be accommodated because of the pulley system. So yes, that's not come up in the past. The prototype layout of the car wash is designed to an F-250 truck size, which ranges from 20 foot to 22 foot long in size. That's the biggest vehicle, and I think it's about 7 foot tall. So that's what they designed the radius is to accommodate for the car wash.
I'm going to ask a dumb question. Is there going to be a sign that says no trailers?
Well, they said it has never come up, but
I know.
and there probably needs to be, and I guess it's probably that's going to be the attendants, some of their job too.
Yeah.
You can't. You got to get them through the bypass lane.
Did that answer your question, Travis?
Absolutely. I appreciate your patience.
Thank you.
Sir, here, since we did provide new information, it may be prudent to just allow if anyone in the public has any additional.
Okay, let's reopen it. Yep. Let's reopen up the public hearing. Does anybody have anything to say? Come on up, sir.
Can you pull that Google Earth up there, Rock, for that section?
I'm trying.
Carl Vaughn, 2586 North Haskett. So
I can't remember your name, I just brought it to her attention that, and I wanted the city to be aware, remember, that's a private drive. So that, back up a little bit more for me, Brock. Bring it down, the whole thing. Down. So this is a private drive that Mr. McCurry owned and built, which is also the same as over here. So at any time, legal counsel, he can block this off, just like he did over there in front of McDonald's. So when he blocks that off, there's no cul-de-sac to turn around. So anybody coming in, when we have to back up, not saying it can happen, I don't know what the agreement with this private drive is when you have a drive-through. So Mr. Brock Cherry can probably answer that question. We've had it up here, that's why McDonald's, there is no parking over that way no more. They just parked the motorhomes there and took all those parking spots away. So, I don't know, if he sold it, or the next business owner just blocked that off, it's a private drive.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Yep.
Karen Halligan, 150 South 12th East. My question was, if you go back to where you have 2 lanes of traffic, can you put that back up? Where after the building is built.
It's not going. I apologize. It's not. It's.
My question is, well, we're talking about that, once they block out that lane, there is no way to turn around. And I was curious, if you've got 2 lanes, they're waiting to get into the ports, right? What if somebody, all of a sudden, an emergency came up and they had to get out of that lane? What if they got traffic behind them, in front of them? Is there any way to get away, or you're stuck in those 2 lanes of traffic? Just hypothetical. Just hypothetical.
I would probably, personally, and I'm just gonna answer this one.
Sure.
That's probably gonna go back to the tenants that are working there. If an emergency came up, they're gonna shuffle those cars out, and they're gonna take care of those with the people that are gonna be working there.
Good point.
So.
Okay,
that's-
yeah, I was just curious about that. I thought,
Yeah, that's a good question, though. That's a great question.
All right, thank you.
Yep. Anybody else? Okay, we'll close public hearing again. Commission.
So if I can, real quick, as far as the design of the parking lot, it looks like the right lane would be in wait in order to go in, and the drip out is actually going the same direction that the cars are leaving. So the fact of that being cut off, I don't think is viable, in my opinion. Because it can go back the opposite way, but that's just something I looked at, and I'm more than welcome to get a change mine.
Can you help me out?
So as you enter,
Okay.
I really wish we could pull this up here.
Yep, me too.
So as you enter,
as we're entering here, does this not go back through a lane going this way? So if you were waiting to get into the car wash here and you're leaving, you're still going back towards Dutch Bros. So if this is
closed off,
does that even hold a viable point of having to turn around or back up? I'm just curious. I don't
yeah,
understand
because there's
why.
no reason to go up here.
Right, there is no
Yeah,
reason.
no, I see
So
what you're saying.
it being cut off, I can see someone leaving, I can see someone leaving and taking that private drive, but if he chooses to cut it off, that's his decision as the property owner or the road owner, whatever you want to call it. So.
Totally understand what you're saying. Yep. Okay.
Mr. Chairman, if there's no other questions, I'd make a motion.
Okay.
I'd like to make a motion to the city council to request a conditional use permit to allow a drive-in establishment associated with a car wash to be located on City View, RPA 0106002020. Subject to site plan amendments as required by building, public works, fire, and zoning officials to comply with applicable city codes and standard. All future developments will comply with the uses, bulk, and coverage controls of the C4 zoning district, and applicant shall meet the performance and design standards of a drive-in.
Have a first, have a second. Second, Scott. All right, Scott, what's over with you?
Aye.
Christina?
Aye.
Aye. Travis? Aye. Aye as well, motion passes. Thank you for your patience, and thank you for, yeah, that's frustrating, I can tell you.
Thank you.
Yes. And I'm happy to say that actually ends our public hearing action items, so we're gonna go down, no new business, no old business, department head items. Anybody have questions? Say no. Sir.
There will be trainings coming up. We
you.
recognize that we have 2 new members who did a very good job for being thrown to the wolves.
Great questions. Seriously,
Great questions, but we will be having trainings specifically on the comprehensive plan, what that means, how to utilize that. We'll get that to you.
Okay.
And we'll keep it rolling, but please have those open, and it may be on a different day of the week instead of a Monday. It may be something we do on a Wednesday or Friday, whenever.
Maybe during the day.
Maybe during the day too.
Okay, can I make a recommendation of,
He wants food. He just wants food. All right. If there is no other things for the commission, ladies and gentlemen, I am going to adjourn us.